Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Council budget hearings. The budget hearings will begin in 60 seconds.
Welcome everybody to the budget hearings for the City of Sioux Falls 2017 budget year here at Carnegie Hall. It's 3 o'clock on the 9th of August. I would like to start by inviting Chief Matt Burns forward to begin with the votes.
Thank you, Councilor. Police Chief Matt Burns, here to present our 2017 budget. Partnering with the community to serve, protect, and promote quality of life. That is our mission statement, and within that mission statement we have several goals. To meet community expectations of law enforcement, crime prevention, order maintenance, and customer service. To provide safety and security in our schools, and to provide responsible animal control enforcement. Within that, we have our core mission. Our core mission we kind of split up into three areas, and that is answering calls for service, investigating crimes, and performing traffic enforcement. The way we measure our calls for service is our response times to our priority calls. As you can see on the slide, in 2014, our average response time to priority calls was 9.7 minutes, or 9 minutes 7 seconds. In 2015, 8 minutes 55 seconds. We had to have a goal for 2016 to end up at the same level of 8 minutes 55 seconds, and you can see our 2017 goal. I can tell you that our 2017 priority call response time goal is reflective of our expanding city footprint, the increase in the lane miles as we develop Sioux Falls, and also our historical experience with our response times. A key when you're talking about response times is to we measure that's the overall time from when the call first comes into Metro Communications until we actually get on scene. So the response time that the police department looks at for our own purposes is certainly the entirety of that call, but also the time within that is when we first receive the call until we're on scene. So that's the piece that we actually have the most control of, is our response time. But overall, you're seeing a number reflective of when it first comes in. Second part of our core mission is investigation of crimes, and it is this piece we feel like we have a very good track record, especially measured against national crime rates. In 2014, and that's the last year that the FBI has finalized the national crime rates. 2015 has not been finalized yet. We do have a 100% clearance rate in our homicides. 64.5% is the national rate. Some of the other key crimes are robbery. We have a 37.8% clearance rate, and nationally it's 29.6%. And down the line, aggravated assault, 85.7%, where nationally it's 56.3%. And I can go on several of those, but on average, we at least, most areas, double the national rate for the solving a crime across the nation against other agencies. We do have some goals, as you can see in the maintenance of maintaining our clearance rate for our violent crime. And for 2016, our goal is to remain at that 70% level. Historically, we've been just above that for the previous 3 years. And our Part 1 property crimes level, we have a goal of 40%. We've come in just under that in the past 3 years. Third element of our core mission is performing traffic enforcement, traffic safety. As we all know, that's a big issue in Sioux Falls, especially as we continue to grow. We operate multiple complaint zones throughout the city where we receive continuing complaints about noise, about speed, about the voluntary compliance with traffic control devices. We also man a number of saturation patrols throughout the year. Some of those are financed via Office of Highway Safety grants, and we also do some internally. It's just a matter of natural course. Part of that has been a very effective piece, our distracted driving campaign, which the council sponsored in this budget year. As you can see, our 2016 goal was to average 115 a month contacts in traffic enforcement, and for 2017 goal, we have 135 a month. Through this enforcement, we have been able to reduce the ratio of injury-producing accidents per 1,000 population from 9.1 in 2014 to 8.9 in 2015. Our goal is to maintain that level of around 9.4 accidents. We know that as our population continues to grow at 3,000 to 4,000 people per year, that we will continue to have more accidents in the city of Sioux Falls just as a function of numbers. But through our traffic enforcement piece, we hope to mitigate that rise in accidents with the enforcement. Ensuring safety within our community is also very important when we talk about our schools. Our SRO program continues to be one of the most successful programs we have at the police department. As you can see, we have 15 full-time school resource officers assigned to the high schools and the middle schools, and then they have areas of responsibility encompassing the elementary schools below that. A key part of the school resource officer program is the triad philosophy, and that is the officer being not only a law enforcement officer, but also a informal teacher, an informal counselor and mentor to the students, and build those relationships that can last for a lifetime. We have a goal of 500 non-adversarial contacts for 2016, and what I mean by that is that's outside any enforcement action that the SRO might have to take inside the school, and 520 for 2017. Lockdown drills goal is we continue to have a goal of two lockdown drills in every school per year, and we've been maintaining that. A brief budget overview. As you can see, our total investment projected for 2017 is $35.3 million. That would encapsulate $34.2 from operating and just over $1 million in capital funds. Amongst our operating budget, $29.2 million of that is projected to be personnel, and outside of that, $5 million. You can see that is pretty close to our numbers from last year. Breaking that down further, the prime driver of our operations budget this year continues to be our wages and benefit piece. Of the $1,350,000 number, $974,000 of that is just normal COLAs and step increases per our contracts that we currently have with our bargaining unit. Some other numbers inside that does include $284,000 for the new officers that we're requesting via the FTE process for 2017. You'll see some other numbers further broken down as far as rentals, repair, and maintenance and supplies, and I can explain those as we get to the questions piece if there's any questions on those. But broadly, you'll see that the budget is mostly taken up within the wages and benefits section. The capital budget is $1.1 million, and the vast majority of that is our patrol vehicles, a portable radio initiative that we're underway to update our portable radios, and again, video storage continues to be a significant part of our capital budget. In 2017, we project to have 16 patrol vehicles exchanged. 11 of those will be SUVs and 5 sedans. We're in year 2 of a 3-year, again, portable radio changeover, and that is 55 radios at $176,000, and then of course $50,000 for our continuing video storage in 2017. I did go through that kind of quickly, but that is the broad strokes. You'll see again the major driver in our budget for next year continues to be the personnel and benefits, but there are some other pieces that I know you'll have questions on, and since we're at that part of it, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Okay, do we have some questions for Chief? Councilor Urbanbach.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you being here. Couple of things, some related, some unrelated. I first want to just talk a little bit about philosophy. One of the things we hear a lot about in Sioux Falls is that crime is on the rise. We're a growing town, and so we have more criminals, all the, blah, blah, blah. Can you talk about crime rate and how we maybe compare to other communities? I know you kind of have this off the top of your head that
Sure.
how do we fit in sort of other communities like us when it comes to crime and how we manage it?
Right. Crime rate can be kind of a nebulous term because there's several factors to go into that. We typically look at our crime rate when we talk about our part one crimes or the serious felony crimes like the homicides, the rapes, the aggravated assaults, and things like that. We do see some upticks in those numbers. There's no denying that. Those do appear to be on track largely with our population, but we have seen recently some incidents where more things have caught that have been in the media, some of our shooting events, some of our things that continue to be a concern with our drug trafficking in Sioux Falls. I can tell you that continues to grow, and we continue to point the appropriate resources at those problems. In comparison to other cities, we still have a very safe community to live in and work in when you look at the numbers from Sioux Falls compared to some of our other regional cities, such as the Sioux cities, the Omahas, the Lincolns, and certainly the Twin Cities. Just anecdotally speaking to some folks who have recently come down from the Twin Cities, and they hear about our dialogue in the media and what we put out on a regular basis about our crime rate, they're like, we're so glad to come here because when we hear you talk about the crime rate, you really have very little crime compared to where we've come from. And that's precious little comfort, however, to those folks who do live here and are concerned about what they hear in the media and they see, because there are some things that are going up. But I would tell you that on balance, again, Sioux Falls continues to be a very safe place to live. We do have certain challenges. That does stem from our growth. That does stem from a certain segment of the population that does come to Sioux Falls that chooses not to be a productive citizen. They are entertaining a criminal enterprise, and they're not afraid to employ violence. The candid answer is we're seeing more of that. But we do have a plan to address that, and that is part of our presentation today, is that the FTEs that we are asking for in this budget will be pointed towards our patrol area to give us an increased patrol footprint and a bigger profile in the the community.
Well, then that leads into my question that I think I ask every year. I've asked Chief Barthel this over and over and over again. Is this enough? You're only asking for 4 more FTE. Is that enough for a community growing as fast as it is?
Yes, and what I can tell you is we run several metrics to look at this question. Some of the chief ones are response times, our average citizens per officer, the amount of calls for service that we are tracking, and over time that has raised since 2008, I believe it is, at about 2.23%. Several of those metrics point right at the 4 officers being added this year if you look at several of those metrics and average them out. What I can tell you is that we are still catching up, if you will, to our authorized strength from a big spate of retirements we've had over the past 24 months, and you can only get those officers through the training program, including and primarily PEER, the Law Enforcement Standards and Training Commission, Law Enforcement Standards, so quickly. That is something of a choke point because they only have so many seats and have an entire state of officers to certify. But we are getting there. We just started a class of 13 officers on August 1st. We have another class we're going to hire 8 on November 7th. So with the officers that are in our pipeline, as it were, plus the 4 that we're asking for, we feel we'll be very well positioned to answer those increased calls for service and to have that increased patrol profile and be able to place those pieces inside our investigative services division and other areas of the department that will also need to have additional help as they process more work.
Good, thank you. Mr. Chair, I do have one other question unrelated, but I'd wait until after others have asked.
Okay, Councilor Staley.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and I'm very appreciative that we're going to be adding 4 new officers, and I do think that we need to, I appreciate that we see on the media that we are telling people to be safe, to be proactive. Lock your doors, have lighting on your house, be aware of where you are when you get out of your car at night. Watch out for your neighbors because we are a growing city and we can't have a false sense of security. We have to face reality. So I'm glad that you are pointing that out when you talk to the citizens. I wanted to talk with you about, you were talking about traffic control, and I asked the other day when we were together how many of those speed trailers we have that have the numbers on and they're flashing lights, solar powered, and I think you said 3 in our community.
That's correct.
Correct. Now, how do you determine which street will get that, to have those sitting there?
Sure. Our traffic section is the section that has a responsibility for working the complaint zones. The traffic speed trailers, if you will, are a fundamental and effective tool to work those complaint and speed zones. So that's based upon the need. They look at several factors when looking at a complaint zone. Is it in a residential area? Is it between a transition between a residential and a business area? So there's multiple factors that go into decide, and ultimately it's the discretion of the traffic section and the supervisors within that section to decide if that's going to be the most effective tool. So that may be placed out there to determine what the average speeds are in an area, so then we can most effectively put the right resources there to management and manage it, and the timing of those resources, whether it's in the morning, at night. Plus, we're receiving information from the citizens who make the complaints on when they're seeing the worst issues. So again, there's several factors that go into that, but it is an effective tool.
And how long do they get to stay in a place? Is there like a time limit? If I see those on the street, do you say, we'll leave them 3 weeks or 3 days?
Right, it just varies. It varies depending on how long it takes to get sufficient data that tells us what the actual average speeds and the problem is in that area. No set time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Bach, another question? Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for being here. I appreciate it. I have a couple questions, if you don't mind. As far as the school resource officers, are those a responsibility of the city, or is that a shared cost with the school and the city?
Right, that is fully funded by the city through our budget.
Okay, and it's required, or is that something that we do collaborative with the school district?
No, it's not required, but as you know, it is a best practice to have SROs in the school, and again, that's been a very effective program for us. But we do that as a fundamental piece of our our enforcement and our engagement with the citizens and the children. That in itself is a mini community policing effort in every school where there's a school resource officer, but that is something we fully fund on our own.
Okay, thank you. And I thought it was, but I just wanted to make sure. And it's something I support. I just was curious how that kind of came together. My other question is in regards to two small questions. Is you said you're hiring 14 and we're playing catch up with the retirements. Out of the 14, how many don't make it on average?
Yeah, out of those, we typically have an 85 to 90% retention rate. The training is difficult. It is lengthy and it's difficult because we do have high standards for our department, for our officers. When you do give someone the power of arrest, the power and the equipment and the responsibility of lethal force, you want a very highly trained, motivated, and fully vetted individual. And so it is a rigorous program. Frankly, some officers get into the job and they realize that this is not what I expected. There's a lot more to this, or it just takes too hard a toll maybe on me or maybe on my family. So that's some of the reasons that go into why maybe they don't make training.
Okay, and one last question, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, and I don't know if this is for you or for somebody in finance, so whoever needs to answer it. And just, I guess, FYI, that the same question I'll probably ask to every single department. I kind of started down this bunny trail last week and just kind of want more information, and maybe it's contacting Bill O'Toole and having a complete analysis done. But in regards to part-time employment, what kind of things does your department use the part-time employment for? How many actual part-time employees do you have on payroll? And then on top of that, what is the equivalent? Again, doesn't have to be answered today.
Sure.
Because I really want to see this broken out per department. I think it would be really helpful to see it on one sheet to say, okay, here's how many part-time employees we have on payroll. Yeah. Here's their full-time equivalent. And what does it look like over the years? Are we utilizing part-time employees more and not doing full-time employees as much? Or and it's different from department to department. Yeah. But it was just kind of something went off last week, and I was like, gosh, I'm really interested in kind of knowing more about that.
Yeah. I'll just talk about it briefly, and then I want to make sure that you get the information from us that you desire. So I'll engage finance on this as well and HR. But we do utilize part-time personnel. We have a contract with the airport authority to provide security in the form of part-time officers at the airport. You see them when you come and go in your flights. We also use them in the crime lab and also here for the security of Carnegie. That those are part-time individuals as well, and animal control. So we do use them, and I'll work with them to make sure that we get your question answered in full.
Well, thank you, appreciate it. And if like I said, if I need to work through our budget analyst to get the information and have just a one-page sheet per department, that might be helpful. I don't want to spring it on anybody, but I just think it would be good to have that analysis. So thank you. Absolutely. That's all the questions I have. Thanks for being here today.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Bach.
I wanted to talk specifically then about the reduction in youth counseling contracted services, the Prairie View Prevention Services. Your proposal is to cut their fees in half.
Correct.
Do you want to talk to the council about what your thinking is there? What's kind of, where have we come from with this? And then what's kind of the vision for where we're headed with it?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. Well, this is one of those things that kind of certainly come into the category of a tough budget decision, but we're all challenged in our budgets to look at things and where we've been with it and where we're at now and exactly our role in that and what's appropriate. The question then became with Prairie View, and let me first say, this decision to reduce the funding was not on the merits of their program, not in the least. That is a very solid program. It has merit. It's well run. And it performs certainly a very, very good and vital function inside the school district setting for those children that they reach out to and serve. The sole question in this matter is we, the city, through the contract with the school district and through directly with Prairie View, are the sole funding source for the school district in this regard. So the question became for us is it appropriate, and then that question is open at this point, for the city to be the sole funding source for this entity. And so that's kind of the question before us. I've got some questions out to the school district to provide me exactly the kind of services that they do perform and to give me a sense of what the value is from the school's perspective. Because again, for the public school piece, the $191,000, we actually contract with the Sioux Falls School District for that, and then they in turn contract with Prairie View Prevention for the public school piece. So their input is vital.
Right, and just to be clear, the city isn't their sole source of funds to
Right,
Prairie
local
View,
funds,
but
yeah.
in terms of the project, the programming that's done with the school system, it is solely funded by the city. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yes. They do have some federal grant funding that passes through the state, but for this piece of the budget, that is solely funded by the city.
And then your plan is to cut it by 50% this year and cut it the other 50% next year, correct?
Correct.
17, 18, I mean, okay. Thank you. That's what I needed to know.
Other questions? Councilor Kiley.
Just a very brief follow-up with that. We've had discussions. Several counselors have discussed the Prairie View Prevention budget item with you, and we appreciate your time and the information. And we have had discussion with Prairie View Prevention board members as well, too. I think we're all in agreement it's a good program. And quite frankly, some of us are looking into helping retain that program. But I would encourage some of the other partners, the school district and the state, to look into their budgets for the next year to assist in that matter as well. Because initially, when you take a look at the amount of money, the $207,000, with a $34.2 million budget for police, that looks like a pretty small amount. But when you consider $29.2 million of that $34 million is from personnel, that leaves you just $5 million. I shouldn't say just, but it leaves $5 million.
Yes.
And now it's 4% of that other budget. So it is something that we will continue to look at, and we would encourage our other partners to look at it as well. Moving on from there, I'd like to, again, just congratulate you on the reduction of the injury accident ratio. It's, even though it is based on per 1,000 population, as a community continues to grow, as Sioux Falls has, that increasingly becomes more and more difficult to just maintain, let alone reduce that. And so you and your officers are to be commended, and I know Councilor Erickson and myself appreciate the efforts that you have put into the distracted driving campaign as well this past year, and hopefully we'll still have some good things to come the remainder of this budget year. Another follow-up question regarding your 2017 goal for deploying officers, 9.05 minutes. 16 goal was 8.55, so we're looking at about a half-minute increase. And you and I had this discussion before, too. Can you once again remind me, does the 2017 goal involve the additional staff that you're going to be hiring?
Yes, yes, that does project for that. And again, that's a bit of a hedge because we know even within the metrics that we've projected, our city is going to continue to expand not only in people, but in its footprint. We're going to add additional lane miles. We're going to add, just in 2015, we added nearly a half a square mile to the city limits. So when you look at these numbers, a bit of context is in order. I would offer that cities our size and larger, the average response time to priority calls is in that 10 to 11 minute range. I looked at that just recently, and that does include, again, the time that it takes for the call to come into dispatch to the officer. So while we don't want to see that rise, and we're certainly going to work to be below that, it is relevant to look at it in the proper perspective of comparing to other places. But that's something that obviously is going to concern us. We're not going to get above that or try to get above that.
Okay, which actually brings me back to Councilor Erpenbach's question about, is this enough, and is 4 additional officers enough? Because I do hesitate to see that that's a good thing, that our response time is going to increase, because then I'm looking into the next year, 2018. Are we going to maintain that, or is it going to increase again? And so I guess I would encourage you to try to do whatever you can to keep that response time close to what it has been in the past.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really? Okay. Councilor Erickson.
Oh, thank you so much. Just real briefly, I know we are going to hear from Fire about it, but in regards to the public safety facility study, I'm just curious if you have any comments or any hopes of outcomes or any of that, anything that you can shed some light on in regards to that. Oftentimes when we see, for me, this is my opinion, but when we see studies like this, it just makes me a little nervous. Are we going to be building more buildings? Are we going to, what are we hoping to accomplish with this? I know there's a description, but I guess I'd just like to hear your dialogue with it.
Well, as far as the police department, the current building we're in we moved into it in 2003. And so we've done a considerable amount of growing there. So in that study, when I took the helm at the police department, I not only look at the issues in the immediacy of the next 1 or 2 years, but I'm also looking in out years. That's one of the things that I've challenged my staff to do. And so when I look that far, I can tell you that as the city continues to grow and we continue to add officers in response to those citizen expectations, we're going to need to have, starting very soon, a concise facilities study to point us in the right direction, and not only for the buildings where we reside now, the law enforcement center, but also our training facilities, and that is on some of the land that we share, co-locate with with Sioux Falls Fire Rescue out at the airport. So again, it's looking forward, because right now, we're fairly comfortable where we're at, but we're not going to maintain that space forever. So again, it's looking forward, and you have to, before you can effectively work a problem, you need to be able to measure it. And I think that this measurement piece is where we're at.
And thank you, I appreciate that. And I guess I would just probably, I know we've had this conversation before, and I've had this conversation with Sheriff Milstead as well, but we know that there are definitely some space constraints and issues with the jail and that. Please, 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 I cannot stress it enough. Please have those conversations before decisions are made, and just have that collaborative effort in advance. And I know this is just a study, but if we can include them on part of this, I think it's a win for everyone, because they are looking at the jail. You've been involved in those conversations. Where are they going to park? What are we going to do? What space are they going to use? I just think it's so important that we make sure that we continue that collaborative effort that you and Sheriff Milstead have worked so hard to do already. So if there's something that they can be involved into this, I say bring them alongside. That's just my opinion here, and not something I'm telling you to do, but just a suggestion as we move forward with some of this, that it's done in the beginning instead of halfway through. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to interject real quick and then come to you. I agree with you 100%. And also, don't leave out Lincoln County in this whole process. If we're looking at having to build something or on anything, if you can get those guys involved, even in the planning process, those are the things that make collaboration a lot easier in the long run. As you guys have worked together so well with Minnehaha County, it's time. Sioux Falls is the largest city in Lincoln County now. We got to bring those guys in and visit with them. I know you do at times, but to get them started early is much better than to try and do it later on. Councilor Neisser.
Chief, thanks for being here. Before Before I ask my questions, I would just say, just piggybacking off of what Councilor Erickson said and Councilor Rolfing, the collaboration is a big thing, so we all want to see that. The only other thing I would throw out, and I'm not expecting a comment, is when I see a $250,000 expenditure on a study, I smell something big coming. I just don't think anybody's going to admit it yet. Okay, my first question, volunteers. Do you make use of volunteers? I think you do, and if so, how? And can you add to that?
Yeah, we have, in the past, we've had a small cadre of senior volunteers, and I think there's one left in that program, but we have utilized that in the past. I'd be certainly open to using volunteers where appropriate in our law enforcement facility as we go forward, but I appreciate that note because they do bring a lot of value to, I think, any organization they participate in.
Okay, I just mentioned the county makes some it's pretty impressive how much the county makes use of volunteers, and I would think there's a lot of people that probably want to give back maybe to your department, so in some way. In your replacement of vehicles, are you moving away from cars and mostly going to the kind of the SUV model? And if so, is that adding quite a bit of cost? And how do you think about that?
Yeah, you will see that we do kind of bias towards the SUVs. What we're finding is that with all the equipment that an officer has on them, that the SUVs just afford an extra measure of space, and those officers who are in those vehicles for 8-hour shifts, it just makes it a lot more comfortable work environment for them. And the SUVs just have added utility when it comes to transporting things. There's many things that come to light that are value added, if you will, in selecting an SUV over the car. They're not terribly more expensive, in my view. You can see the figures straight out of the OSEP budget for the value that they add and what we're able to do with them.
And then as far as hiring goes, do you have a whole lot of luck recruiting maybe existing officers from other jurisdictions, or is retention so low that in all jurisdictions it's very difficult that you could get somebody experienced to come out of state, for example?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of officers that come from other organizations, but we do see them from time to time, usually in every other class, or maybe every class there's maybe one. And that's also a function of it's just not that they look at our department and say it's so much better than where I work. It's mainly because maybe they might have family in Sioux Falls, or their spouse has an employment opportunity in Sioux Falls in conjunction with what they like and see about our city. So it's a number of factors that play into the fact whether we can get a certified officer from another jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Selbert.
Thank you. Just one quick question that refers to that. How many applicants do you generally get now per open position?
We generally see a few hundred applicants for every open position. It used to be more, but we're in the, they've declined. There's no secret there. They've declined across the nation for law enforcement jobs. Given the nature of the media and things that are going on in our country, law enforcement is seeing that generally as a trend.
Are there general age requirements, or are there basics to just even be able to apply for the position?
Right. To be a police officer in the city of Sioux Falls, you need to be at least 21 years old, and there is a 60-hour education requirement that can be waived somewhat through a combination of work experience. If you're prior law enforcement, military experience, it's kind of a combination, and the word is suitable to the hiring authority, but generally there is a 60-hour and associate's level requirement.
Okay. Thank you.
Might as well. Councilor Starr. Chief, thank you very much. This is a well-thought-out budget. You've spent, you and your department need to be commended. You've done a nice job of putting together a thoughtful plan of where we're going forward as a city. One of my questions, and I think it was one that I asked at the same time when we met in your office, what are we doing as a city to diversify our police force? Are there specific plans in place? How can we make sure that our police department matches what our citizens look like?
Sure. Thank you for asking that question. That is an important piece to me. Right now, we have about 6.5% of our entire force, not only sworn but civilian in the police department, is a minority. I want to see that number go up. I think it is important to reflect the community within which we work. Some of the things that we've been doing is, of course, we continue to work with human resources to that goal. Ultimately, you have to have, especially with the sworn personnel side and broadly everywhere, the most qualified person for those roles. But within that space, there's opportunities, I think, to engage the minority communities to Sioux Falls to see what they have to offer. I've met with several of the community leaders from the minority communities, and I've challenged them to help me find persons within their communities that, because I know they're out there, that would make outstanding police officers, and outstanding public servants, maybe even a firefighter. But I would tell you that I put that challenge before them, and I hope that reaps rewards, because I know that they're in our community, particularly the second generation, maybe, who've been raised to know the customs of their immigrant families that they come to the country with, but maybe that have been educated in our system, so they're a natural ambassador between the old customs and the new ways in Sioux Falls and in this country.
Thank you. With one last thing, every one of the other counselors has asked me to ask you this question. It has nothing to do with me, of course, and that is that they would like to know on the traffic enforcement measures, what they are, where they are, and when they will be there, and if you can send them an email to let them know they shouldn't drive by that area.
I actually left that note in my office, but I'd be happy to get it to you.
Okay, if you would appreciate it. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Chief Sedaris, Fire Rescue.
I'm Jim Sedaris, glad to be here to present our budget. Before I start, I'd like to thank our financial analyst, Krista Stussy, who's here, and she worked closely with Division Chief Jeff Helm, who's our administrative division chief, to really make sure that we have a budget that's efficient, meets our needs, and it also protects the taxpayer dollar as we move forward. When we look at our goals are to really protect the citizens and visitors that come to Sioux Falls through a variety of ways. One is through education, prevention, and then emergency management. And that emergency management really is the big crux of what we do. A key thing for us when we start looking at our operation is really how fast do we get to a call. And what our accreditation says is that we want to be there under 5 minutes and 12 seconds, and that's our goal. That's from when we start rolling through the city. When we get the call, it's a minute, and then from that time, it's 5 minutes and 12 seconds. The reason for the 5 minutes and 12 seconds is if we can get all our force quickly on scene, we can prevent that fire from expanding, and we keep those fires relatively small. Also, when we start looking at cardiac arrest, we can look at a cardiac arrest, and every minute a person's in cardiac arrest, their survivability decreases by 10%. We have one of the highest cardiac arrest survival rates in the country, partially based on our time patients. And then we also want to look at our fire loss. We bumped up a little bit on our fire loss, but our fire loss tends to be in that $3.5 to $4 million a year. Normally, for communities our size, it's probably in that $5.5 million a year. Part of that, again, is being able to get our resources quickly on scene and put those fires out as quick as possible to keep that fire contained to a room instead of a structure. Another thing that we're kind of unique in is that we're also saving people money. Usually fire departments cost money. We're saving our taxpayers money through their insurance savings. Sioux Falls Fire Rescue is an ISO 1 department, meaning we meet the highest standards in the country, and we've been giving the ISO 1 designation, which helped decrease the insurance rates both to residents and businesses, which is a big savings. And we're also an accredited department. So between the two, there's only 35 departments that have both those standards. What those standards mean to you is that what we say we're doing is validated by both a third party from ISO and a second third party from accreditation, and they come in and do site visits and they pull up everything about our department. So we just can't cover up anything and say we're doing something without actually proving to both those agencies. For our budget overview, our total budget is $28.5 million for this round. Operating is obviously the largest part at $26.2 million, and then our capital is $2.3 million. And I'll go over each of these, and you can feel free to ask questions as we go, or you can wait, whatever works best for you. The one thing is you'll see that our personnel is going up. I'll talk about that briefly, but our operating budget's dipping down a little bit, and I'll go through specifics about how that does happen. When we look at our personnel costs are $685,000 increase, but that's part of that is really related to a couple things. One, our personnel costs are going up because of some contractual things that happen through the contract that we really don't have a lot of control over. Also, we did do some state mutual aid deployments. We have people right now on deployment. So what happens is if another city's having problems with the fire, right now it's West River for the wildland fires, they'll ask state resources to be deployed across the state, and we'll go to those. Currently, this year alone, we've been on 5 of those deployments, and they do cost some money. For this year, it's been $136,000. But keep in mind, we do recoup those funds for both wages, overtime, travel, and salary from the state. So those do come back into the general fund. So that is one thing that's a good thing. Also, we're saving some money. It's kind of a wash. We're moving fleet. We're centralizing our fleet, mechanics into fleet. So there's a decrease of $165,000. But you'll see later that we're just moving those funds to another department. Also, we did have some professional services and also some rentals. The next big issue is going to be repair and maintenance. And we did have a one-time initiative for Central Fire Station on 9th and Minnesota for $100,000. We looked at that. Part of that is the tuck point operation that we did start previously, and we're kind of wrapping that up now. And that's going to be, we started at $557,000 in 2016, and now we're going to wrap that up at $100,000 to complete that project. Now that will finish up that project. Also, we're looking at some other things for one-time initiatives, and those are station remodels. So in our station remodels, we're looking at Fire Station 6, which is on 41st Street and Marion. We're looking at Central Fire Station to do their classroom remodels, and that's at $32,000. We did that, and then we're also looking at some bathroom remodels and kitchen remodels at Station 1. Those are moving to central services, and they're going to put those on hold, and they're going to prioritize those. We're looking at the 2018 budget. And then I did talk about our fleet changes. So fleet centralization, we're going to move that funding over to fleet for our 2 mechanics. When we look at our operating budget, there's a couple things in our operating budget that we spent last year that will have a decrease this year that won't show up. The first was a grant for our active shooter program. We bought active shooter gear. The world is changing, and we're trying to be ready for that situation if it does occur. We did buy that last year. That's out of our budget this year. And we also had grant funding for SCBA, which is our self-contained breathing apparatus that we wear to fires. We're finishing up that. That was a 2-year initiative to purchase all new SCBA. We can't really piecemeal that in. We have to move across with everybody at one time just because of the way it works and the technology. So we finished that up. That investment will last us 15 years when we look at doing that. Partially, we have the warranties on all that equipment for 15 years, so it's a great investment for us. The first half of that was spent in 2015 was $600,000, and now we're wrapping that up. We also have a one-time initiative is our fire records software. You maybe heard about this coming down the pipe, and that's $200,000. Currently, we're using the New World system that captures all the data, all the calls that come in, and that's now being outdated, and we're looking at changing that system over. And that also allows for our fire records analysis and all our how we record all our calls coming in. That's at $200,000, and that will be wrapped up this year too. We're also, with our radio replacement, we're moving all our radios to OSEP. That's $72,000. And then there's also a fuel savings this year that we're projecting at a savings of $32,000 for fuel. We do have some, our capital program, we're looking at a couple different things. Fire Station 7, which is located about on Cliff and Benson Road, is getting some changes. We're putting in a physical training room. That station was built probably a little over 30 years ago, hasn't been updated. Now because of our contractual obligations and our change now in emphasis on physical fitness, we need to put in a physical fitness training room in that station. It's never had one, and currently the firefighters up there are working out in the same place where they sleep, so it's not the best arrangement for them. And then we're also working on a parking lot improvement up there in that same station. And then we do have our public safety facility study. I know we kind of talked about this. This is a little bit of a joint one with police department. So we're looking at both the large part of that, $250,000, will be going to really looking at our fire training center. Again, it's a joint project with the police department. That's turning into a regional training center. It was built in about late 1970s, hasn't been improved upon, and now we're at that point now where we really need to look at, do we refurb that? Do we change it? Do we build it somewhere else? And there's a lot of factors in that. It's not a standalone building that we necessarily control easily because it's on Air Guard property. So we have to go through the Air Guard. The city owns the property, but it's surrounded by Air Guard property. So there's a lot of challenges there. And then the other half of that is really to look at our fire stations and where we put our fire stations, not only now, but looking at a plan for the next 15 to 20 years, because as fast as Sioux Falls is growing. So that's part of that study. And I know we'll probably talk about that study a little bit too if you have any questions. And then we're looking at replacing our ladder truck, which is truck number 7. Through our use with our financial analysts, we've determined that rather than repair that truck, it's going to be replaced in 2 years, is to bump it up and just replace it now and save the city some money that way. Now it's kind of a quick down and dirty on the fire department, but I'm sure you have some questions, so feel free.
Councilor Neisert.
Chief, thanks for being here. Do you have AEDs on all of your vehicles?
Correct, we do. And there's 2 terms we can throw on. One is public access defibs, which is the smaller ones like you see in the building. We do have those on our vehicles. And then on our mainline fire apparatus, we do have our actual defibrillator that we can do a number of things with. Not just shock someone. They can use pacing, non-invasive blood pressure, in-tile CO2. They can do pretty much everything that's being done in an ER, but we do have those in all our vehicles. That is also helping with our cardiac arrest save rate because we can get those on people very quickly. And we do also have that program for pretty much most of the city. We have a joint agreement with Heart Hospital South Dakota. So we have just about right around 12 to 1,400 of those in the city. That program did win an award from Harvard University as being what they call one of their Bright Idea Awards. It can be a turnkey operation for another community to do. So we do use those, and we've had great luck. Just used one yesterday morning. The police department is really, they're kind of like us, they're real progressive, and they have those in all their squad cars. So do the sheriffs. So we had a cardiac arrest yesterday morning. They pulled up, already had the person shocked a couple times before we got on scene. We switched over to our defib and continued shocking. That person did survive from a cardiac arrest.
Okay, great. And you sort of answered my next question, which was, were you happy with, I know you had an initiative and you talked about it where you're deploying the AEDs to public places throughout the city, and it sounds like you're happy with how that's going.
Yeah, we've been doing that for several years now, and it's been, we don't even advertise it, it just keeps growing. And it's all the schools, pretty much everywhere now has a defib, and people now are looking at the defib, these public access defibs, as why wouldn't we have one there? And it's almost more of a liability not to have one in the public size than to have one. So it's a real benefit to us.
Okay, and I just wanted to make a statement. I went on a 12-hour ride along with Paramedics Plus a week ago, and one of the things that I saw, and I was particularly, it was on, I don't remember if it's called level 1, the most serious call.
Correct.
Level 1.
Cardiac arrest would be a level 1, difficulty breathing.
Yeah, it was very serious, but the thing I noticed when we got there was how seamless the paramedics on Paramedics Plus and your fire department just worked together to extricate this person from the car, and then your personnel jumped on the ambulance. They were all working together, you know, giving that life-saving care all the way to the hospital, and there just seemed to be such a kind of a rapport, and like, you know, they knew each other, and they just all worked together. It was really a neat thing to see. I just wanted to say it was really cool.
Well, it's great to hear. We do train regularly with both police and Paramedics Plus. We're doing something now called pit crew CPR, where we're looking at a pit crew for a racing team on how every single person has a specific job and a specific place to stand for cardiac arrest. So when you think of a cardiac arrest, someone tips over and you're going to do CPR, we're looking at what's the most efficient spot for each person and each piece of equipment to be laid out for a cardiac arrest. And we work with both fire, working with ambulance, and working with the police because we all show up on those calls. Again, best patient outcomes what we're looking at. So when we can get egos aside and work together as a team, that's kind of what we're looking for. And it's working across 3 organizations, and it's working very well.
Councilor Kiley, did you have?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Staley.
Staley.
Sorry, Staley.
Staley,
Isn't that what I said?
okay, thank you. I have a question about that Fire Accreditation International.
Yes.
Where do they come from? They're from out of state?
Oh, yes. They're based out of Maryland.
Okay.
And they do the accreditation for departments across the country. I happen to be on their board, and we accredit departments and look at a number of things.
Well, okay, let me say, that is so impressive. And I think that having people come from out of town to do evaluations of what's happening within our community is so healthy for the process to be played out. So bravo on that.
Thank you.
I also did a ride along with Paramedics Plus, and of course we were hearing a lot of things within the community about you, the fire department, and the ambulance service. And I want to tell you that I have heard a resounding sense of affirmation for what you're doing from the public, for what our fire department is doing. So bravo.
Thank you. And we're here to serve. That's our whole philosophy. Thank you.
Councilor Starr.
Yes, thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. Excuse me, one of the things that really stands out, I guess, in your budget when I go right from expenditures is a 206% increase in overtime costs.
Correct.
But the other thing that goes along with that, from looking at the numbers at least, you're not projecting any salary increases over the next year in your department. The full-time amount is within, what, $10,000 or something when just doing the quick math, so.
Right, and I can talk 2 things about that. The one on the overtime, we're paying overtime for the deployments I talked about.
Okay.
But also we're going into contract negotiations. So I really don't want to talk too much about that because that could be brought up on either side for the negotiations. And because we're going into negotiations, that will affect the wages for next year. So there is all that going on at the same time. So not that I don't want to answer that question, but we might have to answer it in a different forum. Thank you.
Understand. Thank you.
Other questions? I had one comment, if I can make, and that is on your comprehensive evaluation or planning
Yes.
program. Again, I'll give the same admonition that we gave to Chief Burns. Please invite the people from Minnehaha and Lincoln County as a representatives from either one of those or both those organizations to sit in with you, so that we can do this planning together. I look at, again, the facility that you may be talking about. It may cut down some costs if they can be part of it, and give everybody the good training that we need. So would appreciate that very much.
I agree.
If you would
And
follow
we
through.
want to work in that collaborative environment with other agencies.
We've got to be. We're in Lincoln County, and like I said, in Minnehaha, and that's just the way it is. We're gonna work with them.
And we're also working with the Air Guard too, because they have a fire department out there, and they've been really good to work with.
Right. Okay.
One
Another
other
question?
follow-up question regarding the ISO rating of #1, and that
Yes.
is absolutely huge. And we've been celebrating that since 2015.
Correct.
And not only does that lead to efficiencies and responding to fires and helping people in need, but as you've mentioned now and in the past, it does pay in insurance premiums as well, too. Now that that's been in place for a year, when can citizens and businesses start realizing some of those savings on their premiums, and how would they go about?
That's a great question. That's actually, I get asked that a lot. When we talked to the insurance folks, one of the issues we had was, remember back 2 years ago, we had the ice storm, and then we had the hailstorm, and because of that, they're projecting it's going to be at least 2 years before things settle down, that we'll hopefully start to see those savings passed on to the taxpayer. So it's going to be a little while just because of the damage that we've had in both those storms. And they were pretty significant. When I know my house, we did a roof and we had to replace trees, and so it will be a little while yet. But it should be coming, and we're looking at that as a long-term thing too, that those savings will be a yearly thing for those, not only the residents, but also businesses.
Thank you, Chief, and
Thanks.
thank you for your entire department's efforts on that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
that's said, that comes from all of us. So thank you very much. You have a good afternoon. Okay. Mary John's Library. I won't make the comment that I made on Friday.
Why, thank you. Good afternoon, Mary Johns, Library Director, and we're certainly happy to be here to share our 2017 budget comments and activities that the budget will support. I too would like to give a huge shout out to our fiscal analyst, financial analyst, Brooke Parsons. She's extraordinaire, and she has told me that next year she'll be doing the presentation for us. And also a thank you to Jody Fick, our Assistant Library Director. For those of you who are new to the council and may not be familiar with the whole notion of Siouxland libraries, I'll give you a quick little bit of background. Back many years ago, once upon a time, there was a rural county library system in Minnehaha County, and there was the Sioux Falls Public Library. And the infinite wisdom of the two bodies came together and said there could very well be reason to collaborate. So we've been doing that for a long time. So in 1995, the Minnehaha County Rural Library System and the Sioux Falls Public Library merged to form Siouxland Libraries. And coming from various other backgrounds, I can tell you that this was a really smart thing that folks did in this area. It certainly minimizes the amount of duplication that can happen and quite frankly spreads the resources around very effectively. So in addition to the 5 libraries that we have in Sioux Falls proper, downtown, Prairie West, Ronning, Oakview, downtown Cayley, and Cayley. I kind of forgot Cayley for a moment since they're below the radar right now being remodeled and repaired, soon to be a very fascinating place for you to visit. In addition to those, then we also service libraries in communities throughout the county at Hartford, Humboldt, Crooks, Colton, Baltic, Garrettson, Valley Springs, Brandon, and through the Bookmobile, which actually goes to both rural locations and city locations. So we concentrate on schools and daycare centers to make sure that those little ones have access to book resources. Actually, our resources and our services are very much focused on the premise that libraries assist people's desire and need to learn for a lifetime. We like to think that we have folks not only from cradle to career, and I hate to say cradle to grave, but really from cradle to career and beyond. So I thank you for the funding that you are able to provide for library service. And we do make a difference in people's lives. The prior funding for technology implementations has certainly continued to support our efficiency efforts in terms of providing that service and gives us the opportunity to assist customers with direct service and to apply that technology in support of those efforts. That means that we are able to have our staff deal directly with customers rather than doing ka-chink in terms of checking out books and checking books in with the technology, with the digital, the RFID that we implemented a couple of years ago. So that continues to pay dividends for us. Our underlying responsibility certainly is to provide current and relevant materials and to continue on that basis with our services. It's imperative that we provide broad access to information and resources, whether that be print or in the form of programs and presentations or service as you see here. We are both about independent education and partnering with other agencies to ensure our community has access to learning for life. Any number of our programming efforts involve community partners, including schools, businesses, and organizations. Reading, learning, and discovery concept applies to all ages. We utilize programming teams based on age levels to reach out to our communities. We have staff who lead program teams on early learning, after school, teens and tweens, 20-somethings, and adults and seniors. The adult opportunities, as you can see here, have touched a lot of people in the last year, and we have certainly increased the number of programs that we offer. And I think that if you notice the news releases that go out and participate in the programs, you'll see that the adult programming certainly covers the gamut from cultural to financial to technology to retirement and beyond. Promoting reading, learning, and discovery is also a significant part of what we do to do that lifelong learning. And so our teen programs actually involve the teens in developing those programs and services. Most of our locations have what we call TABs, Teen Advisory Boards, and we meet with those kids on a regular basis to find out what are their interests, what are the kinds of things that are meaningful to them, and they help both design and deliver those programs. One of the things that the kids do also is to participate in helping younger children appreciate and access library services. This is also another opportunity for collaboration. One of our groups, called LibCats, is a partnership with Washington High School, and these kids do pretty amazing things in terms of reading and learning and connecting libraries and helping us develop those services. So that's been a very successful program as well. Reading, learning, and discovery, of course, is germane to what we do with younger kids. And as many of you know, this certainly is an effort and a program that we offer that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm not a parent, but I was a kid once. And there is nothing that we can do that's more important to a kid's success as an adult than to intercede, intercept, and help them develop those reading skills. At the same time, their parents are paramount to doing that. Not every parent has the same opportunities, and if we can help those parents deal with their children and make reading paramount, we all can go to bed feeling really good at night. Our efforts in this area certainly include partnerships with other organizations. Again, schools, we host a number of events at the end of the year with various schools throughout the community. We have Discovery Night at Prairie West, and this involves other city departments as well as members of the community who share information and resources with our kids. One of the most important, I think, programs that we have initiated in the last couple of years is a program called Family Place Libraries. This is a national program. We sent staff to New York to be trained in this piece. And it is, again, all about working with the family to ensure that every child has early childhood development opportunities that they might not otherwise have. And so this is a program that parents, mom and dad, or mom or dad, and their little ones, 0 to 3, come to the library for a 5-week session, which helps them develop those early learning skills with their children. And we also have professional resource people there who can talk to you about nutrition, speech therapy, et cetera, so that, again, parents can not only get the information from other parents and say, oh, my child's not doing that, or, ooh, I wonder what's going on. They can also talk to those resource professionals to get assistance. And we've had very positive results from that piece. So, enough about the things I love. By virtue of the Minnehaha County dedicated tax levy, we also receive funds then every year from Minnehaha County, and that is all of Minnehaha County with the exception of Del Rapids. At the time of the merger, Del Rapids opted out of the tax levy. So we annually receive funds from Minnehaha County. This year for 17, $1,080,000 will be our contribution from the county. $1,045,000 of that goes towards operating, which includes staffing and operating the branches in those other communities. And then they also, out of that levy, there are funds that are added to our capital budget, which is our books and materials. As you'll see, our operating budget is pretty flat except for that dip you saw last year, or peak, I should say, that you saw last year, which will go down in 17 because that's our Kaylee remodel project. And you can anticipate seeing that in December. And certainly if, you know, we have regular meetings at Kaylee, and we are doing updates on our website so that you can see the progress on this project and be excited with us about that along the way. So really in terms of our operating budget, it's typically the wage increases that are negotiated by contract and increases in health insurance and those items. We do see some adjustments also in our operating budget in terms of professional services repair and maintenance has gone down, or will go down again because of the Cayley project, so you'll see that dip. The decrease in supplies and materials is in part good management and use of resources on the part of our staff. That's another thing that I think oftentimes is overlooked, that truly librarians are cheapskates in many ways, but we have staff who look for every possible way to do programs on the shoestring, and they do a very fine job of that, and the partnering is also a big part of being able to do those programs effectively. Let me just back up to another thing that the travel and training budget is not because we don't care about travel and training, but the premier training opportunity for public librarians is a conference that happens every other year. So we'll not be going to the Public Library Association next year, and that's an outstanding opportunity for library staff. Then our capital budget is by and large the books and materials that we provide to our customers. We also will be doing some wireless network upgrades at multiple locations this next year. There are Prairie West and Oakview both have fiber that will be installed and make those connections much greater for the internet, as well as some of the issues that we have with the phone system. And those of you who've been here more than a year or two know that this is my favorite slide. This is just one small way of demonstrating the value of library service. If the people of Sioux Falls purchased the materials that they checked out at $20 a piece, there's a whole bunch of money that would have been expended, and we also get multiple uses out of all of those. So I like to think that, yes, the library card is priceless. I love the commercial, what's in your wallet? But that's only a small portion of the value, and most of our value, as in education, is intangible. We don't recognize the return on that investment until years later. And there are two quotes that I've observed recently. One was in a situation in Roanoke, Virginia, where they're putting books on buses, which we are talking to Sam about doing. And the person's comment was, when children learn to read, they will read to learn. So we're going to move on that piece and see what we can do with that. And the other piece is, I was in Puerto Vallarta on vacation and went to Puerto Vallarta Public Library, and the ceramic tile, that was a donation tile, said, children who read have a future. And you all read as kids, and look at the future that you're experiencing right now. So how lucky are we to support the reading, learning, and discovery of all ages in our community? And I thank you for supporting that notion, and look forward to more examples of meeting those needs of our community. Thank you.
Mary. Questions? Councilor Neisert.
Director, thank you for being here. The first thing I want to say is good luck in retirement.
Thank you.
It's going to be a huge loss. I could tell early on that you were a superstar, and I remember when I was running for office, I sat down with you. We sat down for an hour or two or whatever, and it was just incredible. It was really good. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So the reduction in the operating, so that's the repair and maintenance. So it was up this year because of the Cayley remodel, and then it's just basically going back down.
Right.
So it's not like there's a cut.
No, because the Cayley remodel project, most of that did not qualify for capital funds, so it was taken out of operating.
Okay, very good. And then for somebody that's just gotten on the council, I'm sure there's a good answer to this that everybody else knows, but when you look at the books and AV items, it's an every other year thing. I see 600,000 and then I see nothing, and then I see 697 and then I see nothing. What is the every other year thing about? That would be on page 60 of the CIP book, the capital budget books and AV items. 2014 had 633,000. 2015 had zero.
That's a good question, because we basically do the same thing every year. That's not a fluctuating piece.
Or am I reading that wrong, or
that page with me. All right.
So page 60 of the CIP book, or I'm sorry, I'm sorry, the budget book. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
All right.
I was
Okay.
looking at this just before we
Okay.
came over.
This is it.
And what happened is, you notice in equipment, it goes way up. It actually isn't. So the books and AV, the budgets got crossed. So in those every other year, it really should all be the books and AV so high. So notice on the chart where equipment blue is
Oh,
low
okay.
and then it goes up, that's actually the books and AV. There, it's just, we'll get it fixed and we'll. send it
Okay,
out.
all right. It's just essentially just, yeah, okay. Every year you're buying books. It's not that you're
Every
not
year
buying
we're
anything.
buying
No.
books, absolutely.
My question, you're not doing nothing for 1 year.
That's
but-
right.
Look on 223 of the,
Yeah, we just discovered this, and I'm sorry I didn't pick up on that right away. We discovered this just before we left, that when the numbers on this piece don't match
Okay.
on the bottom.
And last question, Prairie West, we live a few blocks away, as I told you, and it's a treasure. We love it. My daughter loves it. Is Kaylee going to be, if I walk into Kaylee when it's done, am I going to feel kind of sort of that vibe that you have at Prairie West?
I think you will feel a significantly different vibe when you walk into Kaylee. It won't be exactly the same, obviously, because there isn't the same amount of natural light, which I think is a lot of the vibe that you find when you go to Prairie West. But it will be much more open than it currently is.
That's what I was getting at. Kind of
Yes,
more the
absolutely.
open kind of floor plan that, yeah,
Yes.
which is very nice. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Erickson.
Thank you for being here. It's always great to have you in front of us. You clearly love what you're doing, so it's been an honor to work with you the last few years. I just have a couple general questions. Talk to me a little bit about the part-time employees. What are the responsibilities of those people? What kind of jobs do they do for that?
It depends on where the part-timer works. We use a number of part-time folks in our rural locations, in part because we're open few hours in those locations. But they will be answering questions for customers, helping them locate materials. They take care of what non-automated circulation there is. And in some instances, they will assist with programming.
Then two other small questions. Just kind of piggybacking off of a previous question with the other director. Do you utilize volunteers in the library, or is that something that you guys use as much as you can get for volunteers?
No, we do utilize volunteers. And I've promised I will not be a volunteer when I retire. But we do use volunteers, and it's very helpful for us. A lot of it is shelving. Some of it is daycare delivery. Some of it will be helping us prepare materials. When we withdraw materials from our collection that are still usable, we also box those up, and then we share those with other agencies in the community, again, as a way to get books in the hands of kids. And so they'll help with that kind of thing as well. So it's a lot of support kinds of services.
One last question. What year was Prairie West built again? I know I live close to there too. We're newer to the neighborhood.
We opened in July of 13.
Of 13. Okay. And that, at that time, I mean, I just think that I support the fiber optics going in there, but that wasn't something that was updated at that time because it's a newer facility. It's a new building.
And what wasn't updated?
The fiber optics network communication
Well, because that's a
cable.
wireless connection at this point, and we are having some issues with that, and IT has been working with that. And one of the things that we're doing with the fiber that we're going to be employing is we've applied for E-rate, which is a federal reimbursement program for technology, and prior to about now or last year, it was an extremely complicated process to go through. So we're able to, we've worked with a consultant, and we're able to apply for reimbursement funds, and we anticipate receiving somewhere between 60 and 80% reimbursement for the implementation of that fiber. So that will make a huge difference in that piece for both Prairie West and Oakview.
Right. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Counselor Staley.
I echo that. Thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify this thought that I had. There are no charges for anyone who ever uses the library, or do you ever offer any programs that they have to pay for, the children?
Every occasionally, there might be a program that's outside, just the regular access. Maybe it's for additional supplies. But by and large, the majority, by far, of our programs have no charge to them.
What a wonderful way to give back to the community. I agree with you about the importance of reading
Great.
and investing in children when they're young. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Counselor Starr?
Yes, thank you, Director, for being here today. I think, can you tell us a little bit about, my kids were surprised because they go to Catholic schools, so they were out a little before the public schools were this year, and they noticed that there is an afternoon snack, at least at Oakview, and some of those things that we're adding additionally to teaching kids to learn. I know I reminded my son how he gets when he's hungry, that a snack oftentimes, but it seems like we're seeing that the library, at least at Oakview, is transitioning into, I don't like to use it this way, but maybe childcare, or there are kids that are there for long periods of time to occupy themselves while their parents are still at work, and an after school type of program. And how has that affected programming and other things that happen at the library?
Okay, a multi-part question, and I'll start with the snack piece. This was a program that we work with Feeding South Dakota. And there are a couple of other libraries, at least, throughout the country who have partnered with similar agencies. And so the idea being exactly what you said. Here are kids that are in school all day. They get out of school at Annie Sullivan and come to Oakview, and aren't we happy that they do? Absolutely. But they are hungry, and it's a way for Feeding South Dakota to reach another segment of the population. And I will tell you this. I am, again, I'm not a parent, but I am appalled, and I don't mean this to be critical of our community, but I am appalled and stymied by the number of kids in our community that are on free and reduced lunch, that have way less opportunity than they ought to have in a city like Sioux Falls. And so when Feeding South Dakota and Oakview came together, of course we want to do this. And we always have had some kind of activity with the kids after school, and try to do that in all of our locations, because we get kids after school all the time and we want them to come to us. That has changed how we do some of our programming at Oakview, because we have a whole lot of kids who are coming now. And part of it is they're involved in passing out the snacks and cleaning up, and we always have some kind of activity afterwards. They're not forced to do this, but they have the opportunity to participate in a program afterwards. Sometimes it may be, throwing the football out on the playground or on the lawn at Oakview, because they are still restless. And yes, you're absolutely right. There's more of this kind of programming going on for us. We have a lot more kids in all of our locations, quite frankly, who are latchkey kids in a modern world. It's a little different than when some of us were growing up, perhaps. But here again, we have staff who are charged with looking at one of those programs that I mentioned, program teams, is the after school. And so while we don't want to make it just an extension of the school day and discourage them because they're out of school, we want to make an extension of the school day in a different and fun way. So we are working on that at all locations.
Super.
Welcome.
Yes, Councilor Kiley.
I don't have any questions over the budget, but I just want to take the time to thank you, Director Johns, for your enthusiasm. You're innovative, you're progressive, creative, you're everything that we really want in a chief librarian and somebody that's going to be directing this program. And I know that it's been challenging over the years too, because libraries have been impacted by technology probably as much as any other business across the country, or as much as our homes have been too. And those, you've met the challenge. Sometimes the changes haven't been the most popular, but I think they have been worthwhile. And I thank you for your involvement in me personally in some of the programs and the opportunities that I've had to read. It's been wonderful, and I'm going to greatly miss you.
Thank you. And not to get too emotional here, but I would like to say that personally, this has been 5 years of a 45-year career that are memorable. And I walk away feeling extremely indebted to this community, appreciative of what the support that not only the council and other departments have given, but this has just been an absolute blast in my life. And I couldn't go out on a higher note, so I thank you all for that.
And for those of you who I insinuated on that on Friday's meeting, I told her that when she gave her report that we were going to take a vote as to whether to accept her resignation or not today, and I was sure which way it was going to go. But she assured me that she was going to go anyway, so thank you very much, not for leaving, but for doing such a good job for Sioux Falls and the kids. Appreciated, much appreciated. Okay, Parks and Rec, Director Kearney.
Good afternoon, council members. Don Kearney with Parks and Rec. Appreciate the opportunity to present our 2017 budget to you this afternoon. Every year, we spend a lot of time working on our budget, and just wanted to thank our Parks and Rec team, our finance team, HR team, IT team, all the folks that come together to really put this budget that we're about to present to you today. I thought we'd start out a little bit by providing some background on the department that I think would be helpful to some of the new council members, but also equally helpful to some of the existing council members that may have heard it before, but it might be a good refresher as well. So with that, I wanted to start out with the vision of the Parks and Rec Department, and that is to provide a comprehensive mix of high-quality parks and recreation programs, facilities, and services that contribute to a quality of life that's unparalleled in the region. A little bit on the National Citizen Survey results. In 2015, there was a survey conducted, and we have standard questions that are on there every year. And so I thought I'd share a little bit about what Parks and Rec, people in Sioux Falls are saying about Parks and Recreation. One of the things they say is that 88% of the residents think that our parks are top-notch, and 73% of the residents believe that our recreational opportunities we offer are of high quality. I tell you, in looking back at previous surveys, these numbers are pretty consistent. Sometimes they're 2 or 3 points a little higher, sometimes a little lower, but it's a pretty good indication of where we rank year to year. A little more on the department overview. When you factor in all the properties that we maintain within the department, because we maintain not only our Parks and Recreation properties, but we assist other departments in the maintenance of their properties as well, primarily because of the grounds care background that our team has. The majority of these acres with regard to parkland are spread across 80 different parks and 54 holes of golf. And then we also have several undeveloped sites that are future parks to be. Another a little over 2,000 acres is comprised of storm drainage ponds, where we assist the Stormwater Management Division in doing some mowing and some spraying and assisting them with their particular efforts. All the medians in town, the landscape medians, and then we also do grounds maintenance at other city properties as well, again for other city departments. The other thing we do is care for 28 miles of paved off-street bike trail, which continues to be one of the most popular amenities we have in the city. For some of the new council members, we did install 6 trail counters last year where we began counting the trail users, and it's kind of a neat deal where we have 6 locations throughout that 20-mile bike trail loop. And it's been a little over a year now, and in that 1 year time frame, we've counted over 1 million users on the bike trail, realizing that some of those are duplicate counts because they may go by more than one counter. But again, it just shows you the amount of use that it gets. And I always like to throw out, what kind of percentages are we seeing as far as bikers versus pedestrians? And it's changed a little bit because of we came through the winter, and we now, after a year's worth of results, 65% of those are bikers and the other 35% are pedestrians. A little bit more about our department. We think it's important to really educate folks that might be viewing today and just create an awareness about the number of public and private partners that we have. We have over 25 program sponsors where they could be the folks from First Premier Bank that help us with our Wednesday track meets. It could be South Dakota Junior Football in the case of the partnering associations, Pickleball Club, Figure Skating Club, SEBA, Dakota Alliance Soccer, Flag Football, Junior Football, Lacrosse, People for Youth, Disc Golf, Minnehaha Archers, just a lot of those different partners that are out there that maybe we provide the land and they provide the service, or they provide the program and we provide the actual land. And it's just been a great partnership. And I think the key takeaway that we want to make today is that without all these partners, we wouldn't have the diversity of the program offerings that we have today. We wouldn't be able to do all the instruction that goes along with the baseball program or the soccer program. And so to have that collaboration with all these other partners is tremendous. We're also on schedule to host 70 athletic tournaments in 2016 throughout our park system. Many of you are probably aware of the coverage on the ASA National Tournament, the 14 and under last week that we hosted that. That's a great accomplishment from our perspective. But also in 2017, we'll hold another championship, and that's the Midwest Regional Soccer Tournament that will happen next summer. And so the quality of the complexes that we provide, both on the softball side and on the baseball side, as well as the soccer fields that we have, really get put to the test, and we're ranked and scored amongst all the other cities that offer those, are divide to compete for those tournaments, and we rank right up there every year as far as the ultimate scoring of those. And hats off to our team that, and the partners like People for Youth that bring these to town, Dakota Alliance Soccer, who do a great job as well. The other thing is that we have a pretty solid team of city departments that work on processing special event applications. This year we are processing 126 applications for special events. Some of these are as small as maybe a 50-person fun run, but some of them are as large as Jazz Fest and Hot Harley Nights and many of the other larger events that happen in our city. Our police department, public health, electrical inspectors, ADA coordinators, risk management, Parks and Rec team are all involved in vetting those particular applications, because at the end of the day, we want them to have a safe event that meets all the requirements of the city. As you can see on the chart on the right side of this slide, you can see that in 2015 we were able to track 3.5 million participants or program attendees that used our park system. And this is obviously only the participants that we can actually track through our partners or through our own programs. And it doesn't obviously take into consideration the casual everyday use that our park system supports. So it is an excerpt from our annual report, and it does provide a nice breakdown of where that attendance comes from. Here again, one last slide on partnerships. We have several facilities that are managed by third parties, and again, to have that partnership with those different organizations that you see on those slides really does show that we have a lot of partnerships to not only partner on in various capacities, but also to manage our facilities. And we think that's a great list, and we continue to promote that as much as we can. A little bit on 2016 updates on our major projects. The Midco Aquatic Center will open on time and under budget. We are starting design on the Levitt Shell and Falls Park West project this summer. We'll continue to work with Quest Development on the build out of the hotel and the restaurant, and continue to work with the community development and economic development on making that a reality. We have completed the final phase, the third and final phase of the Elmwood Golf Course renovations, and currently we're in the process of growing in that West 9, which was the final phase of that development. We just wrapped up a 2-year process to perform a detailed hands-on inspection every park in collaboration again with several city departments. We go and walk those. We used to do it all in 1 year, but now that we have 80 parks, we've broken it down into 40 parks a year where we're able to walk through those. We do site inspection. We bring our ADA coordinator. We bring our police officers. We bring risk management. We bring a variety of different partners, including city engineering, to really inspect the park and create a list of things that we really want to look for in the future. So if anybody thinks they're being shorted, know that the entire team's there looking at each and every one of our parks across the city. Moving on to 2017, I want to emphasize that we'll be able to start our budget calls for the operation of the Midco Aquatic Center for its first full year of budget operations. Obviously, we budgeted last year for a partial year operations, but now we're budgeting for the incremental increase to take it to a full year of operations. We'll complete a comprehensive rate analysis on our programs and services and our charges for those services. We're right-sizing the pool calendar and hours of operations to align with customer demand, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. We'll continue to work with the Quest Development on the build-out of the Holiday Inn Hotel and Suites and the Crooked Pine Ale House. And we'll focus on continuing to provide quality programs and maintaining our infrastructure. Now about the numbers in 2017. Our overall budget is $22.3 million. $18.2 million makes up the operating budget. $4.1 makes up the capital budget. And the picture on the right is really one of my favorite events that we offer. That is the youth triathlon that we offer. Obviously, you don't need to be a triathlete to participate in our triathlon, and it's really a great event. But in this particular case, Wellmark is one of our sponsors of that event. And so that's just one of the examples where we have a public-private partnership again. Now on to this budget, which really talks about the major changes from the 2016 budget to the 2017 budget. And it probably comes as no surprise that the key difference is the full year of operations at the Midco Aquatic Center at $1.1 million. We also have some schedule changes at the outdoor pools and changes to our recreation program offerings, which represents a $200,000 budget reduction. And then we also have an other category that rolls up a $200,000 budget reduction, primarily due to some one-time projects that occurred in 2016, like replacing the Great Bear deck. And then, as you probably heard from Tracy and others in previous presentations, we're seeing some utility and fuel savings as well, which makes up that reduction. So these major changes make up a $700,000 increase in our total operating budget for 2017. So let's talk a little bit about the programming changes for the outdoor pools and some of the rec programs. We are recommending that we do not open the outdoor pools in 2017 until the day after public schools let out. We were able to experience the new public school schedule for the first time this year by using our historical schedule by opening on our typical Friday before Memorial Day. The key takeaway was that attendance was very slow until the public schools let out, which obviously makes some sense. But not to mention some of these same students that are still in school are also our staff members. The pools did pick up notably on the weekends while school for the public schools was still in session. But again, based on what we saw, we are recommending that we delay the opening of our outdoor pools to coincide with that public school schedule let out for the summer. A couple other points I'd make is that the weather historically is cool and wet that first week of operation, and something that will be new in 17 that obviously we didn't have the advantage of this year is that the Midco Aquatic Center will be open during that same time frame, so there obviously is still a place to swim. One of the other recommendations that we have for you is, and is reflective in our budget, is closing the pools from 8 to 9 p.m. Our experience has been that the last hour of operation is typically, again, very slow. We did some counting in recent weeks, and the new patrons come to the pool between 8 and 9 p.m. Averages one new admission per pool during that 8 to 9 time frame. And I would also note that 8 p.m. is also the scheduled closing time for the Midco Aquatic Center when we open this fall. For some of you, you may remember back in 2010 when we did close the pool at 8 o'clock during that year, and really saw very little feedback, if any, on any concerns about doing that. So we think that's a good recommendation. And then the other thing that we currently do within the department, as days get shorter and cooler as we move into the fall, we start to close at 8 o'clock as well for that same reason. Onto the cultural arts programming, we're also recommending that we reduce the Sunday municipal band performances from 2 to 1 on Sundays. We offer an afternoon municipal band performance, and then we also offer an evening performance. The evening performances, the total attendance, actually more than doubles the afternoon attendance. And talking to Chris Hill, our bandmaster, he would tell you that the heat is the primary thing that keeps people away. And then he said he's also had a couple band members drop because of the heat as well over the last couple years. And so we've talked to Chris about this, and he fully supports that plan as well. The other thing we wanted to do is, whenever you're doing recreation programming, the key is to keep it fresh, keep it new, keep something different going on, because after a while they kind of go through a life cycle and then they kind of tail off. And so one of the things that we're recommending that we phase out is Jazz at Faywick, youth band, summer singers, and entertainment on the Greenway. And what we're seeing is that some of our new programs that we're offering, like Sounds at the Falls, which keeps growing in popularity, Mondays at McKenna continues to be very strong. And then coming soon, we will have 50 free performances that will be available at the Levitt Pavilion starting in 2019. And then obviously we've got hundreds and hundreds of recreation programs that we continue to offer throughout the year through the Recreation Division. And so those are some of the recreation program changes that we're recommending as well. Now specifically onto the Midco Aquatic Center, obviously is the most significant change that we have within our budget for 2017. In total, we are estimating that we will have $1 million in total revenues, and it's broken down as follows: $438,000 in passes and daily admission, $302,000 in programming revenue, and then $295,000 in sponsorships. For everybody's information, the $295,000 also includes the $220,000 per year from Midco in their annual title sponsorship requirement over that 10-year period. And so that's part of that $295,000. So in total, $1 million on the revenue side. And then on the expense side, we are projecting $1.5 million in expenses. $800,000 is obviously one of the biggest expenses we'll have, which is personnel. We have $373,000 in utilities, $185,000 in supplies, and then we have another $139,000 that's spread across various other line items to support the operation of that facility. The net operating impact is projected to be $500,000. The result, after you factor everything in, is that 68% of this cost of running this facility is supported by user fees and the sponsorships that we are projecting on the revenue side. Now onto the capital program. Our capital budget in total is $4.1 million. As a reminder, everybody that's watching, while we do have a 5-year capital budget, the council only appropriates and provides dollars for that 2017 year. And so in that first year, coming up next year, is that we have new bike trail construction, we have bike trail reconstruction, we have cyclic programs, which include play structures, and then we also have a cyclic program called Park Roads and Parking Lots. A little more detail, as far as new trails, we will be constructing a new trail from the Big Sioux River to Dunham Park. We will be reconstructing the section of trail that's from Cliff Avenue to Minnesota, or that Spencer Park area. It's really some of the oldest trail that we've got out there, and it kind of winds really sharply through the trees. We will be replacing 5 play structures across the city. For the benefit of the council, we have a 20-year replacement program. So we try to get 20 years out of each one of our playgrounds, and based on the age and condition of that playground, it does get replaced. And so we have 5 new ones that will be installed this next year. And we are reconstructing the parking lot at Elmwood. We've had some settling of that parking lot. It's been there quite a while and is in need of replacement. As it relates to the 5-year plan in total, we have $27.3 million that's identified in that 5-year plan. And some of the highlights over the next 4 years, or 5 years, excuse me, is the Levitt Shell Falls Park West development, where we'll actually do the construction in 2018. Again, we'll have new bike trails planned. We'll have bike trail reconstruction in there as well. We have a variety of different zoo buildings that we're going to be assisting with out at the that are really some of the oldest buildings that we have out there, so we'll be partnering with the zoo on that. We also have the Terrace Park Master Plan improvements out later in the plan, where we'll implement those master plan improvements. And then we'll be doing an upgrade to the Culver Lake ball fields. We've got some fences and dugouts that need to be replaced at that facility. And as the mayor mentioned, we have removed the River Greenway from the plan. Obviously, we're not walking away from the River Greenway improvements, but one of the challenges you have is that you have a significant dollar amount that's in that plan, and without a real location of where that's going to go. And so if there's an opportunity that shows up and there's a project that's ready to go, it's something that we can certainly revisit with the council as well to evaluate those on an individual basis. The other thing we have, and it's been in there since I've been here for 11 years, and that's the Explorer Community Center. That's a community center out in our southwest part of town. And every year, as we look at that, it's bounced around in our capital plan for a long time. And it was in there even before I got here. And one of the things that we felt like was important to do is that if it can never really move forward, it really must not be a priority as we weigh all of our other capital projects across the park system. And so we have removed that from the plan as well. So that's what we have for you, an overview of our department budget. And I'll be here along with our entire team to help answer questions.
Question, Councilor Kiley.
And I think I'll just start with the last slide, the improvements plan. And I'm looking on page 66 of the budget book under operating budget by source and program. And there's a category external property maintenance that sees a 42.9% increase. So is that increase due to some of these improvements that you listed on your last slide, or are there other reasons behind that?
You know, we have a new financial software system, and some of that may be to the just reallocation and where those costs go, but I'd have to kind of confirm with my financial analyst to determine whether that's really where those dollars are why the increase is there. Yeah. And so as we've gone through the entire budget process, there's a, you know, kind of a shifting, and you're coding certain things to different areas. And there's some new line items that are within our budget that talk about, for example, parks and playgrounds are different categories than we haven't had before, but we're really trying to capture that so it can be useful information to us down the road. And so there's not a whole lot of change that's going on there. It's just how things are being coded.
Okay.
You have one more?
And then, yeah, actually two more.
Okay.
On the same page, under operating budget and source and program, it's not a very large item. Well, in fact, it's zero at this point in time. Rental charges, but what's missing there? Because it's gone, well, in 14, 144,000 down to 89 to 34, now nothing.
Yeah, another good question for Krista.
A similar situation?
Why don't we get back to you on that one, okay?
For a venue that we are missing? Well, I know there is one now over at Sherman Park that we're missing. That took a hit, pardon the pun. And then the training and education, thank you for the laugh, Councilor Erickson. And on page 67, city clerk liked that one too. Page 67, under training and education, we have a reduction of nearly 50%, and I'm wondering what we're reducing there.
Yeah, we're just reducing the amount of training and travel that we're doing, primarily because of the lower projections on revenues.
Okay, because sometimes from an individual that's in the training and education business, when you make cuts there, it often leads to costs elsewhere. So a little concerned over that. Can you give me any examples?
Yes, I can. We typically send 2 or 3 people to our national conference, the NRPA, National Recreation and Parks Association Conference, and the majority of the dollars, which involves most of the travel and the lodging, is associated with that, and so we're not sending folks to that particular conference. Again, we believe, I believe that'll more than likely, or we'll at least hope that's just a one-time blip in the screen, and then we can get back on a regular cycle, because one of the things we try to do is rotate people that are able to go to that on an annual basis, so we can spread around some of the training and seminars that folks will be able to go to.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Councilor Urbanbach.
Thank you. Thank you, Don, for being here. A couple of operating questions, and then I have a couple of CIP questions, if I can. First, I just wanted to talk about, or have you talk about a little bit, kind of the job issues that you have, especially in the summer with part-time folks. Can you talk about, you know, did we fill all our positions this year? Is this something that we need to look more closely at? Are we paying enough? You know, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you know, I would say we did a pretty good job, but we've really had to work at it to fill our positions. You know, we've really tried to bring up our park maintenance positions and the athletic field maintenance positions, because those seem to be the hardest ones to get. And the challenge we have is that we have such a large number of seasonals that even a quarter rate across the board is a major increase. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, and it's included in this budget, is that we have some increases for our recreation staff. Those are the ones that really hadn't had an increase for a while, and so we're going to bring those up. But I think the really big thing that we're seeing now is that we're hiring more high school kids. We used to hire a lot of college kids, but now we're really, we're hiring a lot more, 15, 16-year-olds for pools than we ever have. And then we're also, there's certain labor laws that you can only have them do certain things based on their age, and so that's a limitation too. But, we work with finance and HR, and our staff are always out at the college campuses, STI, Augie, USF, setting up booths to try to create greater awareness, talking to the high schools to try to get the word out. But I'm not going to lie, it's tough out there. It really is. And but I think if you drive by and look at any fast food restaurant, they're looking for people. It's just a tough environment. But one of the things that we find is that when the unemployment rate shifts, then we've got more applications than we can possibly process. So it's kind of a feast or famine, it seems like.
Right. Well, I had just by chance, a family friend stopped by last night who's a lifeguard, and and it reminded me once again, my family went through that whole time too, where our kids were lifeguards and whatnot, but that stretch of time that those young people work, and how tan this girl is, she's been out in the sun all the time, and I think it's a different job than wiping tables at McDonald's or whatever. And so I just wonder if that isn't something that we need to continue to look at in terms of, are we paying enough? Do we, are we at that point where we need to think differently about those folks?
Yeah, the good thing about it is that we're hiring a lot of kids that are very good students, and they're very active. They're in activities of all types, and they need time off for those types of activities. And so what we're finding is that we're hiring more and they're working fewer hours per employee, because we have to cover the time with just more employees, because a lot of them, hey, I've got football camp, or I've got basketball camp, or I got to go to cross country, or I'm in band, or whatever it might be. And so that's a dynamic. We're just having to use a younger workforce, essentially, is what it's amounting to, and more of them.
Right.
But yeah, I would agree.
Then just one more on the operational side. You brought it up, and because I had not caught it, summer singers and summer band and some other programs that are just kind of going by the wayside. Can you talk about that philosophy again of that? That's been a program. That one in particular, summer singers and summer band, has been very popular. It might be related to retirement of the leaders, but I wonder if you could just talk about that idea again of those really special programs, what we're thinking of there.
Yeah, the youth band, summer singers, one of the things as we look at, one of the things I mentioned earlier, we're doing a comprehensive review of all of our rates that we charge for our programs. We'll bring a consultant in and really evaluate, what should we be charging, what is a community philosophy around that. And one of the things as we've gotten this new financial software, have more involvement from our financial analysts, those are the two programs that are really have a high cost per participant. And as far as the value and making our taxpayer dollars go as far and serving the most people, that one, while it's a great program and people love it and it serves a number of people, it doesn't really rank up there as far as providing as much value as maybe some of our other programs do. And that's really the focus on those two particular ones.
Good, thank you. I do have two CIP questions, Mr. Chair, if I could come back to those later.
Okay. Councilor Selberg.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. Like on page 22, when you talk about some of these adjustments, they seem kind of minor, but I suppose over a stretch of time it does add up. I mean, is it significant savings, like closing the pool an hour early? Is there a number in mind that all these smaller moves add up to?
The hours of operations, backing off from 8 to 9, and also waiting to open the pools until the day after public schools let out is $116,000. And that represents the majority of the cost savings.
Okay, great. One other question, it's probably been asked and answered at some point, but just a reminder, what are we hoping for on the aquatic center beyond the first year financially? I mean, we see that big number kind of in the red the first year. Will we see the gap close? Are we hoping for that in the next 2 to 5 to however many years?
I think it'll really, time will tell. We think we're going to be just really busy at this facility, and we hope the revenues obviously outpace our projection. We hope the expenses don't. And but I don't know that we have a whole lot of projections beyond that until we get into it and live it a little bit and experience, hey, what are those, do we need to massage the hours of operations? And then also, obviously, there's always a question about fees and what do we want to charge for fees. They've been set for the next 3 years based on city ordinance this past year, and so we'll have an incremental increase in those rates, and so that certainly should help as well. And obviously, our goal is to keep that number as low as possible from 500 and going down, but we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
You bet.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Don.
You bet.
I appreciate what you do for our city because our parks are clearly a gem in our community. And, you know, in the business that my husband and I operate, we have a lot of people that come from out of town, and that's one of their favorite things is a park. And each one's different. It might be McKinnon Park. It might be Spellerberg. Maybe not so much right now while it's under construction, but it's definitely a jewel, those parks in our community. So I appreciate what you and your staff do. My questions are in regards to the Midco Aquatic Center. Recently, during the budget address, we heard about that we could have been operating in the black. I will strongly disagree with that. I don't know that that would have been operating within the black because this council chose to have a say in what the numbers were, what the rates were going to be. And I'm very appreciative of having that conversation and have gone through what we've been through. But my questions stem around some of the numbers that are there as far as the projections for revenue, the projections for the operating. I know in 2014 and 2015, the expenses were projected about $693,000, and we've seen a pretty significant jump since 14 and 15. They were the same, and now our expenses are 1.5. I'm curious why we jumped so far from those projections.
Well, the projections that were provided previously were based on the toolbox options that Councilman Hunsaker had provided, based on a kind of a standard pro forma based on square footage and what they've seen at some of the other facilities. What I can tell you is that we also have overhead calculated into these facilities. At the time, he also used our existing rates that we have, and since then we have increased rates for our staff. And then there's a certain allocation of some of our management staff that's allocated to that as well. So we'll have 3 full-time staff, which I don't believe Councilman Hunsaker contemplated, because we'll have one rec specialist, we'll have a rec coordinator that'll transfer from our office down to the Midco Aquatic Center, and then we'll also have a full-time maintenance person there. I believe most of his calculations were assuming almost all of the time would be based on having part-time staff. And so, granted, the numbers are different than they were previously, but I think the bottom line is actually better than what Councilman Hunsaker had actually projected. And obviously, the Midco title sponsorship is a big piece of that.
Yeah, it certainly is. I know that since we've realigned, if I may continue, we've realigned the passes for indoor, outdoor. A pass is a pass. You can buy a couple different things. I'm curious, though, specifically to the indoor exclusive. Where are we for pool passes? How many have we sold so far for just exclusive indoor pool passes? And then I'm also curious, the differences between, you know, we talk about, I know a lot of your numbers are per pool. So if I buy a pass for my family and I'm going to use indoor, outdoor, where will that be allocated to? Is that go in the Midco numbers or does that go for outdoor? Explain how that will be tracked going forward.
Well, my team can correct me, but to your first question, the number of passes we've sold for year-round are 225 already. And so we had some folks right out of the gate bought the year-round pass. We have had 3 fall, winter, spring purchase those passes. And this is where it gets a little more technical as far as the allocation of those dollars. But I believe the summer pass will continue to stay with the outdoor facilities, and then the year-round and the fall, winter, spring will be available for allocated towards the indoor facility. But I can verify that with you through an email as a follow-up question.
Nope, that's fine. That makes sense. I'm just looking at my notes here. My other question in regards to the title sponsor, I understand there's other advertising of $295,000, and $220 of that is Midco. Remind me how that gets reported, if that goes directly into your budget off the bottom line, if it goes in the general fund, will we see it? How is that?
The 220 from Midco will go directly into the general fund, and then there's also a commission payment that we pay to Legends through that agreement that we have, whereby they'll be compensated for their commission, and so that'll be on the expense side.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help, and thanks for clarifying some of the expenses from what we saw and where they're actually going to be coming in. Appreciate it.
And I'll follow up with you on the allocation and get that to the council.
Right. And I would just say the same question as I don't know if you were here earlier, but I know that I've asked Bixler to reach out to the departments in regards to part-time employees, how many actual part-time employees we have on the books. I know not just based on full-time equivalent, but how many do we have on payroll, and just kind of just an analysis of that I'd like to see as well. But like I said, David Bixler will be reaching out to the department heads for that.
Sounds good.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You bet.
Counselor Neisert.
What is the starting pay for lifeguards?
I believe it's $10.50.
Okay.
$10.50.
Okay, very good. The $295,000 in sponsorships at the Midco Aquatic Center, $220 is Midco. Is the other $75 just a projection of these smaller ones? You held that press conference recently, or is that in the bank? Or
that is exactly right. We do try to project that we'll have some additional sponsorships along the way, and so it's our best estimate of what that might be.
Okay, and you show the estimated $500,000 net operating impact for the indoor pool. For outdoor pools, what are their general net operating impacts on a yearly basis? Is it like kind of the range? Do you have that a number in your mind?
I can get back to you on that one. I don't know that one off the top of my head, but I certainly can follow up with you.
I'd be curious what the range sort of is.
Sure.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Counselor Starr.
Yes, thank you for being here, Director. I've got a question about the Sioux Falls Stadium and the improvements that are part of the budget. Some are capital and some are in the operating. So I was curious what we're doing. I don't think you addressed any of that. So.
Yeah, let me ask Tori Miedema, one of our park development specialists, to come up and answer that question. He's one of our capital guys and probably give you the best answer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, Tori Miedema, Park Development Specialist. The improvements that we have, the physical improvements out at the Sioux Falls Stadium, are part of the visitor clubhouse renovation. When we took our park site evaluations, and I think it also came up from the past ownership, was that our visitor clubhouse ranked pretty far on the bottom of the league, and so we did have an architect study that, and basically the type of improvements are a lot of ADA accessibility stuff, bringing the showers up to basically current code. Right now they're kind of the prison-style showers. There's also a lot of locker room space, taking out a couple walls to make the lockers comparable for what you'd expect with that level of play. And then also just some, I believe we're replacing the boiler, and then some lighting improvements.
That's what you expect in the visitors' locker room, isn't it? We don't want to make it too nice for them.
It's kind of like the Boston Celtics when they painted the visitors pink. So
thank you.
Yep.
That it.
You bet.
Painting it pink, right, Troy?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. Okay, seeing no other Counselor Staley.
Would you, that's opening date of the swimming pool, because I know our school start date and ending date are going to be fluctuating, maybe even being changed after, what is it, 2 years, I think? So is that something you're going to be flexible with each year to say, so it's not set in stone?
Yeah, we wanted to try it first based on the traditional schedule and just see how it went, but, it was just really slow. But I think if it does happen to change again, I think we'd want to reevaluate and reassess it, because we really like the schedule we had before they changed the schedule, but just, we want to be open when the majority of the people want to swim and are available to swim, and that's really what that's really all about.
Okay, just a few more things. I was surprised recently, we heard about the spray park at Pioneer Park, that there was no supervision there. Has there been supervision in the past, or has that always been just kind of?
You know, it's probably been 6 or 7 years since we last provided supervision there. And it really, for the most part, we actually went back and looked. We really have had 0 police calls. Actually went around and talked to 4 or 5 different families that were using the facility. Said, have you had any concerns or issues? And it's really been very positive. And so we've not had it for probably 6 or 7 years there, but we did try it out at first to see how it was going. But you know, a lot of the parents police themselves. It's mostly parents and little kids, and so it's really not necessary from our perspective.
And the last thing is, I agree with Councilwoman Erpenbach about lifeguarding and the shortage of lifeguards, and I'm thinking we close earlier in the fall because of kids going back to school.
Correct.
I was a lifeguard growing up. I love outdoor swimming. I think it's a huge benefit for our community. I'd like to see more outdoor pools. I know we've got the indoor pool, but more outdoor pools. But I think part of what's going to help with getting kids into lifeguarding is promoting the swimming lesson aspect so that we build them up and train them. And I know swim teams are doing that now, but even just, I grew up just swimming outdoors and taking lessons, and it's a wonderful opportunity. So I'm hoping we will pour more energy into that swimming lesson aspect.
Yeah, just a couple comments. I couldn't agree with you more. We try to keep as many outdoor pools open as long as we can with the number of staff that we have available. But it's inevitable. They have to go back to college. They have to go back to their activities in the fall. But we really try to at least make sure we had 1 pool open through Labor Day. That's our goal. Sometimes we're able to have more longer. But I think the really big thing that's going to really help lifeguard recruitment and retention and growing our own is the indoor aquatic center, the Midco Aquatic Center. It'll provide us year-round opportunities to be able to train and certify that we've never had before, and there's a group in town that does it, but they're constantly swamped with trying to get people certified. So this is really going to help us.
Yes, Councilor Neisert again.
Thank you. I just thought of a couple extra. Is there a thought process on what the future of Frank Olson Pool will be?
Yeah, it was identified as part of the Aquatic Facility Master Plan for removal and relocation or reconstruction of a different type of facility at that location. Since then, we've replaced the pool boiler at Frank Olson, and it's really what we would say probably extended its life a little bit, but it's certainly our oldest pool that's yet to be renovated, and certainly we're going to take a look at that over the next few years to see what should be done with that and how do we better serve our community for aquatics. And that, along with Keene Park, is also in that Aquatic Facility Master Plan that ultimately, over time, will have to be addressed as well.
Okay, and the last thing, I'm not sure exactly how to frame the question. As far as Project Trim, have you looked at and thought about alternative models and how much they would cost and done any cost-benefit analysis?
Yeah, actually about a year ago, we gave a presentation to the City Council. I think Councilor Alfing had asked for that. And so we've got that presentation. It's available online, and we've provided some projections to, I think the request was, can we do more on the level of service for that? And certainly we can, and we've provided those costs.
I'll go back and watch that. Thank you.
You bet. You're welcome.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. I wanted to talk just CIP just a little bit, and I realize one of the questions I have is about an outlier. But I want to talk, and it kind of goes back to what you said about summer singers and youth band, that we have some parks that are becoming really niche parks, that they really feed only one part of the population in terms of their interests. One of them would be the outlier. Again, in 2020, we have $20,000 set for an extreme sports park master plan. And that would be one of those that I think would be very much a niche market. It may be very popular, I don't know. But the other piece for me then is the, again, a niche market is the Arboretum in East Sioux Falls Historic Site. Can you talk about that idea of, number one, this council or previous council appropriated money for the Arboretum that wasn't spent this year, and in part, we all know why, but there is money in 2017 for it, and then zeros the rest of the way across. So not necessarily fulfilling the plan or the promise, but at the same time looking at, again, that other niche. Can you talk, and I realize it's a broad conversation, but we need to continue to have that conversation about if we have said to a group that we're going to help you do this and that it's parkland and we're going to take care of it and we're going to do this, then how do we justify when we start saying, yeah, no, we said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to go over here and do, mud pits and things like that for extreme sports. Can you talk about how does that thought process work and how can we incorporate that philosophy in with the conversations that we have as a council?
Yeah, I think the key there is that one of the challenges, obviously, with the Arboretum is it's got, creating greater awareness about the Arboretum, I think, is one of the challenges. Being able to support the number of hours of operation that we have at the Arboretum. We're open at limited hours, but yet we have the significant facility that we have out there in the education center. And so I think the challenge we have currently is just trying to make sure that we can continue to have the Arboretum Society support operations. We're trying to grow the budget. We're trying to generate additional revenue, trying to get more support. But one of the limiting factors with the Arboretum is that it's very difficult to generate revenue out there. And I think that's a piece of it that we really would like to see enhanced so that we can grow our operating budget to be able to sustain operations on the Arboretum side of things. And obviously we've had those conversations as a board. And so that's the reality of it. And I think the challenge, knowing that we have the operational challenges on the Arboretum side, not that they're not doing good work and making progress, it's just, do we want to build more before we're able to grow our operational budget to be able to support the things that we're doing? And so, trying to just make sure that if we're going to add more as far as capital goes, are we well positioned from an operational standpoint? And that's really the crux of the issue that I see there.
Well, and the flip side of that same coin, though, is that we need more infrastructure at the Arboretum in order to grow that operational income. That the wedding garden needs to be built. The places that really would generate income haven't been constructed yet. And so, again, that idea of, we've said that this is a project that the city wants to do, but we've really pulled back on it. And I think it's you can't even really compare it to the River Greenway. We talked about it being pulled out of the budget. That to me is a whole different animal. This is one of those where we've gone in with a small nonprofit and said, yeah, we're going to do this thing. Oh yeah, but we're not going to fund it. And so that's where I struggle. And so would you talk then about that extreme sports master plan? And I'm not saying I'm against it. I just want to try to understand how is it that we look at those projects, and think about how do we feed that truly small piece of our population, with the concerns or the demands that they have.
Well, I would tell you that we're always, we probably got hundreds of different ideas that we're pursuing on an annual basis, right. And that's one of them. And that's really, the idea is that we've had a lot of requests and that there's a craze going across the country and across the world to be able to do some of these extreme events. The challenge is we don't have a place to do them, and or that we're willing to allow them to use the space because we know what it's going to look like when they get done with it. And so that's always been the challenge. We do have some outlying parcels, some of these undeveloped sites that we've thought of is that could that be a place where you didn't really care what happened to it because as of right now it's undeveloped and you could do potentially a lot of different things. It could be multi-purpose. The whole idea behind that project is really just to try to explore if you had a piece of land that you could do some of that stuff on, what would it look like, where, what would the features of it be? And it's really kind of an exploratory project. We're not going to put any capital into it at this point. It's just more of a planning project than it's not actual infrastructure, just planning work. So yeah, I realize that that's maybe an odd one maybe, but I think that's what we're here to do, to dream up those different ideas and try to meet a need that we're seeing. We got color runs and mud runs and obstacle course races through mud and, the cross country and cyclocross and all these alternative, kind of like skateboarding to a certain extent back in the day when that was a new craze. Well, now it's still going strong. And so, I think we're just trying to meet a need out there, and that's where that comes from. But, and so I really don't compare the two, when we think about trying to evaluate what's a priority or not. There's a lot of different things that are on the table. Some things stick and some things don't. Maybe this extreme sports park idea doesn't stick, and that's okay. But I think at least we can say, hey, we explored it when we looked at it. We're committed to supporting our partners. I think the thing is we've had some things not go well in other situations. We have Great Bear. That didn't always used to be a city facility. We have the Ice and Rec Center. That didn't always used to be a city facility. And so I think there are some risks out there, much like we had our conversations around the Ice and Rec, or the Ice Center and then the Hockey Center. Are these going to come back to us eventually? And we just don't want that to happen again. And not that it will with ice or tennis, the new facilities, they're very busy. But I think we're just a little cautious is all. And I think the conversation among our board members, which I'm one of, are just want to make sure that we're well positioned going forward. So when it is time to do that next phase of development, which I think we all think will happen over time, we just want to be ready for it.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Kiley, one more.
Thank you.
Please.
Okay, and it's not a question. It's just more of a comment. And I know that over the years that you and your department have taken some hits over different topics, and especially pools and locations and things of that nature. And there certainly is not a shortage of individuals that have wants and desires and their needs met. And there are those of us on this council that are committed to keeping rates low for our citizens and especially for our youth. But when it's all said and done, and once the budget has been hammered out, you have delivered a top-notch product year in and year out. This park system is our crown jewel, and it's the best not only in the state, but in this entire region, and I'd put it up against anybody. And there again, you and your staff are to be commended for your efforts.
Thank you, appreciate it. I know the team will appreciate that too.
Thank you, Director
Thank
Kearney.
you.
Last on our list tonight is entertainment tax. Tracy Turbeck, Director Turbeck.
Good afternoon. We're going to finish up today's session with a presentation on entertainment tax fund. I know I was encouraged by Councilor Rolfing to keep it fairly brief. I've got an hour left, so I think I can work within that. No?
We might have a vote on that.
All right. Entertainment tax fund is a fund in and of itself. The revenue source is our 1% tax, oftentimes referred to as the entertainment tax, sometimes a third penny tax. You may hear it referred to from time to time as a BBB or bed, board, and booze tax. It's all the same thing. It is a 1% tax that's levied on lodging within the city of Sioux Falls, hotel and motel type of lodging, short-term stays, alcoholic beverages, prepared food, whether you're dining in or carrying out, and then also ticketed events. So that's really the scope of economic activity that is subject to this 1% entertainment tax. And then the use of those dollars does go into a fund, a separate fund, and is not commingled with other city dollars and is restricted as to how it can be used. So we in Sioux Falls use it to support our entertainment venues. We have a number of them, and I'll walk through the budget overall and then take a look at each one of those venues and how they're being supported with entertainment tax dollars. But I don't think I have to educate you folks certainly on the benefit and the value of having these types of venues within our community, but it certainly provides a lot of enrichment and entertainment, whether it's arts and science or other types of activities that are taking place in these venues. It certainly adds a lot of enrichment to the community. Looking at the overall picture in the entertainment tax fund city budget that's proposed for 2017, we're looking at a total budget of $6.9 million. $4 million of that is proposed for operational expenses and $2.9 million for capital. The pie chart shows you kind of the relative makeup of the city's use of entertainment tax dollars. You can see a little over half of that is proposed to go to the Washington Pavilion, about a third or a little more than a third to the events complex, 10% to the Orpheum Theater, and then a small amount that will support the Sioux Falls Stadium that we were talking about just a moment ago. One thing I want to point out is that there was a time not so many years ago that the city general fund did support some of these venues, the Orpheum, the arena. The general fund did provide some support for those entities, as did our second penny sales tax. And that's, we have progressed to the point where all of that general tax support for these venues has been phased out. So all of the support for our entertainment venues does come either from the revenues that those venues generate by providing their services and activities, or from this entertainment tax source of funding. So the $6.9 million total budget does represent an overall decrease of about $1.2 million compared to the current 16 budget. So this is a high-level summary of those four slices of the pie, and shows you the comparison of the current 16 budget with the proposed 2017 budget. So you can see the events complex, which is our Premier Center complex, the Convention Center and the arena, is flat with 2016 at $2.4 million. The Orpheum also flat at $700,000. The Washington Pavilion is down fairly significantly, about $1.3 million. That's largely due to some capital projects that are in the 16 budget that are rolling out of the budget then, and we are proposing a modest increase to the Sioux Falls Stadium. So that all nets out to a $1.2 million decrease with a proposed budget of $6.9 million. So looking a little closer at the events complex, again, these are the three facilities when we refer to our events complex that we're talking about: the Premier Center, the Convention Center, and the arena. They do really, in a lot of ways, function as a single entity, a single unit out there. So we treat them as such within the city budget. These facilities, as I think you all know, are managed by a third-party management company, SMG. We do have folks here from SMG today, so if you ask me questions I can't answer, I'll let them stand up to the microphone and do their best to answer your questions. So you can see the operating contract. We're proposing no entertainment tax funding to support the operating contract with SMG, and that is the case this year. We're expecting that to be the case in 17 as well. So what that tells us is that the operations of those facilities that make up the events complex are expected to support the day-to-day operational costs of running those facilities again next year. No change in the property insurance. That is something the city pays directly out of the entertainment tax fund. And then you can see some modest changes in repair and maintenance and capital for the events complex. The one thing I'll point out, the $1.9 million in capital is not much of a change. It is really focused in 17 on our convention center. $1.8 million of that 1.9 is proposed to go to the investments in the convention center. There are some, you can see some significant, really kind of taking care of a facility that's getting up there in years now and really needs to be refreshed. Some of the HVAC improvements, the bathroom remodeling, some of the systems within the building, like the fire alarm system. One of the things that we do periodically with our facilities is to do an evaluation, and we've completed one recently with the convention center and the arena and looked at that, and these are some of the priorities that have been identified within that effort to kind of freshen up and really take care of the facility and keep it new and functional. There are also some very small amounts in there for the arena, as well as some equipment for the event center. But the primary investment in terms of capital for the event complex will go into the convention center. Looking now at the Orpheum Theater, this is a facility that's also managed by SMG under that same contract that we have for the events complex. You can see a proposed increase for the operating contract for a budget of $515,000 for the operations. The Orpheum does not in and of itself generate enough revenue to support all the expenses, so this is something where the entertainment tax has been supporting it in the past. One thing to keep in mind, though, even though we budget to cover that operational deficit at the Orpheum with entertainment tax dollars, what's happened this year and last year is that the events complex that's managed by SMG generates enough positive operating income to offset the deficit at the Orpheum. So we utilize that positive operating income to support the Orpheum so that the entertainment tax dollars don't have to. But it's important for us to budget for that possibility. If for some reason we don't see the kind of results at our event complex that we're expecting, we've got the wherewithal to cover the operations for the Orpheum Theater as well. So the actual deficit for the Orpheum, it would be my expectation that will be offset with operating income from the events complex. You can see we're budgeting $41,000 for capital at the Orpheum. I think that's primarily some sound and lighting improvements that we're making for that facility. Looking at now at the Washington Pavilion, as you folks know, the pavilion provides a variety of programming, providing arts and science to all the people within the community, all ages and all walks of life. And I believe we've got folks here from the pavilion as well to answer questions if you've have questions for them today. The operating contract in the case of the Washington Pavilion, which is again managed by a third party, Washington Pavilion Inc., which is a nonprofit entity. The operating contract is proposed to be flat to the current contract. Again, the property insurance is covered by the city to protect our asset. We're breaking out some of the costs that had previously been budgeted as repair and maintenance into a separate rental line item so we can track those separately. That's something that we've tried to do in recent years, is to provide some funds within the city budget that's within the city's control, not part of the operational funding for the pavilion, but to provide some opportunity for them to take advantage of opportunities that come along, whether it be for traveling exhibits, for shows that they might not otherwise be able or willing to take on the risk to bring to town. And really the goal is to help them become stronger financially in the long run so that they can on their own take on some of those opportunities and take advantage of those as they come along. But we are proposing to continue to fund that. It looks as though those rentals are new, but that's really just shifting money into a category by itself from the repair and maintenance class. Some of the larger items in terms of the repair and maintenance, you can see we've got $700,000 that we're budgeting for the pavilion. We do take care using entertainment tax dollars for some of the larger repair projects. In this case, I think this will be the second, 2017 will be the second of a 3-year program to replace all the carpeting, for example, in the pavilion. That'll be over $200,000 next year, and then 2018 will be the final year of that. So that's part of that repair and maintenance. We're also looking at supporting them with entertainment tax dollars for ticketing system, and again, some building and equipment repairs and maintenance. The larger items become the city's responsibility. The smaller day-to-day repair and maintenance issues are handled by Washington Pavilion, Inc. Looking at that $900,000 in capital, it is down considerably from the current budget. We do still have some capital improvements we want to make to the roof. Here again, in 15, we conducted a comprehensive analysis of the condition of the facility that identified some priority investments in terms of ongoing capital improvements to the facility. It's really going to provide us for the next several budget cycles some priorities that we'll be tackling in terms of building improvements, mechanical, electrical, structural kinds of issues. So that's really the kinds of things that we'll be looking at next year. think that's all I really needed to say about that. I'm sure if you have questions, we can answer them. Lastly, the Sioux Falls Stadium, this has been the last entertainment venue where we've rolled it into the entertainment tax fund. A lot of these costs previously had been borne through the general fund. We are anticipating a structural analysis of this facility to be completed this year, and so we are putting a little more money in the budget next year to address some of the expected outcomes, whatever they turn out to be, for this facility as well. Tori talked about some of the specifics that Councilor Starr asked about that are planned, but we also anticipate once an analysis is done, there may be some things that we learn that we'll want to tackle right away. So we want to make sure we've got some of those entertainment tax dollars available to do that. Overall, I'll just want to close with kind of recapping our priorities. I think it is important for the city to continue to reinvest in all of our facilities, and in this case, we're talking about our entertainment venues, to keep them looking nice, keeping them looking new and fresh, and functioning effectively and efficiently. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish, and really becomes our number one priority with regard to how we deploy our entertainment tax dollars. We do challenge our management company as well as the Washington Pavilion to maximize the utilization and the potential that these facilities present to the community. So we do have a very good, very close working relationship with these groups, meet with them regularly, whether it's talking about possible new uses of the facilities, how we can best maximize the use. And I think we really have seen a lot of good things happening in these. I was at an Orpheum board meeting the other day, and just it's very impressive the number of days that facility is actually getting used, even though it's not a profit center for the city, but I don't know that it was ever intended to be that, but it is being heavily utilized, and that's certainly gratifying to see. We do anticipate that there will be slow years in the future. I mean, we've had some very, very good results, and particularly with our event center and the financial success that we've had since it opened in September of 2014, but we don't necessarily expect that that's going to continue indefinitely and grow forever and ever. So we do want to make sure that we are prepared for the unexpected, whether that's a slow year economically from that standpoint, whether there are unexpected costs. So that is a priority as well, to be prepared and have some funds on hand to deal with the unexpected. So with that, as I mentioned, we do have folks from SMG. I also have Chad Stoner from Spectra, who is our food and beverage contractor for the events complex and the Orpheum. And I believe Darren Smith is here. If he hasn't come in, he's hiding somewhere.
Questions, Councilor Neisert?
I don't know if this is a question for you or SMG, but is it, in terms of the Orpheum, is there, if it is reasonably busy, something that can be done or things are looking at to make it where it might close the gap or break even? And then my other question is, does the Orpheum and the Washington Pavilion, are we putting two agencies essentially competing with each other for a lot of the same business? I mean, it seems like there'd be some overlap there.
I think there certainly is some overlap. I know that I've had conversations with both Terry Torkelson, the GM from SMG, as well as Darren Smith, and I know they've had conversations between the two of them as to how they might be able to better coordinate and help each other succeed in their own venues. There aren't necessarily always those things for the event center that will be appropriate for the event center, the convention center. Not necessarily everything that works in the Orpheum will work in the Pavilion, but I think there are opportunities that if dates are booked and an opportunity comes up to share that information and in effect to some degree cross-sell each other's facilities, I think that's certainly a possibility. I can tell you that the Orpheum is an old facility. It's not inexpensive simply to keep the lights on and keep it operating. So that I don't know that we will ever get to the point where it operates in the black and on its own, in its own right. But that's certainly a worthy goal for us to have, and that's something that we're constantly challenging SMG and the Orpheum board and brainstorming and trying to find ways to make the financial results as good as they can be.
Okay.
Councilor Staley.
I was, would you, going back to when you said some of these were moving from the general fund to the entertainment tax, say again which ones those were?
The,
venues?
well, you're going to test my memory a little bit. I believe the Orpheum has been supported by the general fund in recent years. I believe the arena, perhaps, I'm not positive of that. The stadium certainly has, as recently as last year.
So those three?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Councilor Urtenbach.
Thank you. Couple of things. First, what's the definition of an entertainment venue? Is that set by state law, or did we determine that?
I believe it's set out in city ordinance as far as which venues will utilize. And it's not necessarily an exact definition, but
Right, it's those three locations that you've been talking about now. Is there anything that prevents us from adding to that list? I mean, we write the ordinances, right? Would there be value in using this tax more broadly? And I can see out of the corner of my eye, Darren Smith is starting to get a twitch. But
so he is here, huh?
Is there something to that, though, in terms of that idea of the entertainment tax, at least right now, is really strong? Do we need to be thinking about it differently?
Well, let me answer this way. I think the long-term answer is perhaps. There may be some opportunities there. I don't know that now is the right time to be looking at that, because we have just significantly expanded our entertainment venues in recent years. And I'd like to get a few more years under our belt and establish a longer track record in terms of just how some of these venues are going to function and operate on a financial basis before we look at expanding. But I think that's certainly something worthy of thinking about and at some point discussing.
Well, and one of the things that was most recently added was the zoo in terms of as one of the allowed uses for that tax as well. So just to continue the thought process with Councilor Staley. It is just something that has been on my mind over the last year or so, that especially with something like the Levitt Pavilion coming online, you know, and to go back to my conversation with Director Kearney about the Arboretum, you know, at some point I think we need to look at our definitions of what falls under that tax. And then just finally, not a question, but just again, I think I said this last year too, I appreciate that better view of the pavilion actual expenses, so that it's not just one big lump of cash that we just dump at the doorstep, that it really is being used for maintaining the building that the city owns. So I appreciate the accounting that's gone into that. So thank you.
Councilor Erickson.
I don't know if this is the appropriate question for this or not, so if it's not, we can talk offline. But I'm curious if you have an update on the $1 million fund for the event center, what the balance is and what that has all been used for from the siding settlement that we had. I just hadn't heard a whole lot about that yet, and I wasn't sure where we use those dollars in whole and if we've got some sitting there still.
We did have a presentation plan for the council in July, and I know your schedule, your agenda's got clogged up with other important things. So we are planning to come back next month with a presentation kind of recapping where we are with the overall event center project budget, some of the results. The audit for last year has been completed, so we'll touch on some of that so you can see get a real final look at what the operational results were, and then talk about some of the upcoming improvements that we're looking at for the event center itself. So hopefully we'll be back within the next few weeks with a presentation on that.
Okay, thank you. And if I can have one follow-up.
Sure.
And I know this is just completely a rumor, but I just would like to hear it from you. You know, we've heard a little rumblings here and there that the Sioux Falls Stadium is moving. And I'm guessing that's untrue, and I think it's untrue, but I guess I'd like to hear it from you.
That would be news to me, yeah.
Okay. Well, we had heard about it a while ago, and just recently I'd heard a little rumbling here not too long ago, and so I just kind of wanted to put that to rest, to make sure that it is in fact not, and that you're doing an evaluation of the building to see what needs to be updated and where it needs to.
Yeah, there are no plans to move the stadium.
Thank you.
Councilor Starr.
Yes. Director Turbeck. First, thank your staff for adding the page numbers to the slides. I know Councilor Kiley asked for that last week. It's been helpful for my notes this week, so someone was listening and I appreciate it, and I think the rest of the council does as well. My question's more about the Orpheum and where we're at. When you look separately at the Orpheum budget, what is the amount of money that's moved from the event complex to the Orpheum?
I think in 2015, the operating deficit for the Orpheum was about $400,000.
And we're probably close to that for 16, or is that what they budgeted? Or
I don't think that has changed an awful lot for 16. It is, like most other things, I think, is gradually increasing as costs increase. But
yep, and depending on events, I'm sure, in tours and what's available.
You can see the budget for 15 for 17 reflects about $500,000.
One of those things with the Orpheum is I equate it to what we do with libraries and some of the community theater and things that we do, but at the same time, continuing that process, that's a big chunk of change that we're investing in the Orpheum. And maybe, again, I know that the board, and I know you serve on the board, that or at least you're the liaison from the city, that maybe we'll need to start looking at a different type of management structure or someone who specializes more in that. Not that it's ignored or not looked at, but at the same time, I think there may be other groups that may be better suited for that as we move forward. I mean, it's a large investment that we're making as a city into that thing, and I'm not sure that it's totally inappropriate, but at the same time, balancing those things, maybe it's time to take a look at another way of doing it or managing the facility.
Yeah, I don't know that you'll find many facilities like that in communities that actually do operate in the black. I think every community that has an Orpheum theater or something along that line does provide support from taxes. And it's important to keep in mind that we're certainly benefiting today from the positive financial experience we're having from our event complex that can support that. But even without that, if we're utilizing entertainment tax dollars, those are dollars that are intended to support that kind of a facility and those types of activities that benefit the community, make the community a better place to live, does add enrichment to the lives of the people that live here. And so that's the choice, I think, that you folks have to make when you're budgeting. Is that an appropriate use of those dollars or not? And I think up to this point anyway, the consensus has certainly been that is appropriate.
The headline tomorrow will be that Councilor Starr wants to close the Orpheum. I'm sure that's exactly what we're going to see, and that wasn't the intent, but maybe to continue to take a look at that, because that it's a large investment, and we're balancing a lot of things as we're moving forward and entertainment and providing services for the citizens. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Neisert.
I do second what Councilor Starr said. One last question I thought of. Did we ever get an estimate on how much it would cost to replace the event center siding, and how much would it be?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
You made a very good point there about the entertainment tax taking care of some of the I want to say losses, but the operational deficit that we have on some of the venues that we have in Sioux Falls. But that tax is being paid by the people who basically use those facilities. So it's not a direct a burden, if you will, on people who can't afford to do that. For instance, the Orpheum, we belong down there, my wife and I, and we pay for different things. Same thing with the Washington Pavilion. And anytime we go out to the events that are happening, that extra penny helps pay for each one of those events and those venues. And so I think it's an appropriate way to do that so that we're not burdening everyone with that tax. So thank you very much. Any other questions?
You can't let Darren off the hook completely. You got to grill him about something.
Well, okay. Darren, would you come forward for a moment, please? Come on.
I'm going to owe him something cold.
Yeah, what I want to do is just have you give us your name and your title. That's it.
Yeah. Well, Councilor Rolfing, I can never be that short. You know that. No, I'm kidding.
Darren Smith, new president and CEO for the Washington Pavilion, and I'm having a blast. I miss you guys, but I'm having a blast.
I'll bet, I'll bet.
Yes.
Any questions that you have of Mr. Smith? Well, you're off the hook. That was, I will set a record, that was the shortest presentation ever made by Mr. Darren Smith. Thank you very much. Yeah. Whoa. I better adjourn the meeting on that. Meeting adjourned.